Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am back in the saddle from my visit to Detroit, Michigan, and Kalamazoo as well for my cousin's wedding. I'm your host, Alex Jones. I'll be here live all this week, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. This is obviously another important transmission coming up today on this Monday, already the 29th day of June 2015. It was the top big link on Drudge Report today. Americans sign a petition to ban the American flag. And it's no joke. I first said that a few weeks ago. Limbaugh and others made the point, and Farrakhan obviously called for it last week, which is kind of reasonable in a way. I mean, the American flag has had more slaves under it than the Confederate, if you go by that benchmark. The Greece collapse is now admittedly happening. And Jim Rogers, one of the top analysts, says you ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into huge news on the Second Amendment front and so much more. Very important broadcast. Huge news on ISIS. They're saying no one could see these attacks coming. Really? We've only perseverated on it for 4 years, warning of the so-called rebels blowing back on the West by design. It's all coming up today. But first, the Pope comes out hardcore against the Second Amendment and for world government. John Bound reports.
Joe Biggs here with Infowars.com. Now, this week, the Pope decided to go full retard when he released a statement saying the gun manufacturers are not Christians. Well, I find that extremely funny to hear that coming from the Pope, because here at Infowars.com, we do have a Christian-owned gun manufacturer as a sponsor, Head Down Rifles. Now, their CEO and co-founder, David Hunsucker, released a statement where he was just completely in shock by the fact that the Pope would release such a statement. Going after manufacturers of guns. This is a Christian-owned company. These guys provide a service for families who do not have the money to go to these expensive grocery stores and buy food. Head Down Rifles allows families to go out, hunt, put food on the table for their families. Now, also, they provide a service in security. Now, why do we need security? Because we live in a world where bad things do happen. There are people out there who intend to do harm to you, your family, and your belongings. So you have to take it upon yourself to go out and protect yourself and your family. Now, there is a verse in the Bible, Luke 22, verse 36. Jesus says to them, "But now if you have a purse, take it, and also a bag. And if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one." Now, what does that mean? If you're going to be walking around out there, you need to be able to protect yourself. This is in the Bible. But the Pope doesn't want you to have that. He's jumping on board with Obama, with Feinstein, with Holder. What happens in areas where they go and grab your guns? Look what happened in France with the Charlie Hebdo attacks when ISIS was able to just move freely about and shoot things up, kill people. Look what happens when ISIS comes to Texas, here in the U.S. They get shot down. Why? Because we are able to protect ourselves. We live in a world where bad people do bad things. And you have to sometimes take it upon yourself to protect yourself. There's not always going to be this divine power that's going to jump down and stop a bullet coming at you. You need to be able to pick up a gun and be able to protect yourself and those around you. And that's what it's all about. It's funny how the people who want to take your guns are the ones who are most surrounded by them. The president doesn't want us to be able to have our guns, and yet he is completely protected by tons of people with firepower. Feinstein, completely protected by people with guns. Eric Holder, completely protected by people with guns. When you look back in history at all these nations where the weapons were taken away from...
The population was murdered, and that's Joe Biggs with that report. There was another one that John Bound did that's excellent as well. We're going to come back with the Greek meltdown that's causing the world stock market to plunge. World government is going into high gear. In our face. Decades of globalist preparation for planetary dictatorship by a scientific and technological elite enforced by a military-industrial complex is now upon us. Everything else has been part of the overall takeover. And then once the planet has been taken over, the absolute consolidation of power and vertical integration begins. They've taken over almost every government and almost every bank. Now they're going to take over the individual and the family. Now the real drilling in is commencing. All hell is going to be breaking loose. The enemy is assaulting on every front, making more and more outrageous announcements to move the Overton window. And if you don't know what that is, it's a political science term coined in the middle of the last century of how political elites only operate within what is seen as acceptable within the political paradigm, within the establishment, middle of the road. But that they will have radicals out on the edge making announcements that sound over the top to make their announcements that are slightly out of the Overton window not sound as radical, so that you will accept what they're doing by increment because their vanguard is so far out, having Jocelyn Elders 23 years ago as the Surgeon General nominee calling for the school to help children ages 5 masturbate. In 1994, that sounded insane. Today, it's standard. Sex education. That's how you move the Overton window. So when you hear them announcing, let's ban the American flag now, and you hear them announcing, you know, men inherently are bad, families are inherently bad. See, it goes from tolerate different people, alternative lifestyles, using the true innate libertarianism of America and the West that created modern liberalism, Jeffersonian ideas, and using our tolerance to then conquer us. And we're not being conquered by transgenders, folks. They just use one of the most extreme novelties to get universal acceptance of that, because then it sets the precedent for the social engineers to be able to set the precedent on any issue they want. But you got to have radical litmus tests to so confuse the political debate. The public is often left field trying to find phantoms of racism, banning paper bags and trying to ban Thomas Jefferson statues in Austin, Texas, and wanting to dig up Confederate generals and move them out of cemeteries, while the globalists are involved in a planetary program starving an additional 15 million people a year from what was just happening 6 years ago. You had like 20 million people starving to death, according to the UN, a decade ago or so. And now it's 35, 40 million. And it's all because of the global economy and what's been engineered. And then there's an argument by laissez-faire, quasi-liberal trendies. Well, there are too many people, but I should give up all my rights to stop man-made global warming, supposedly, to save the third world, even though that's all a red herring. So what they have is both thoughts in their mind at the same time. They're liberal. All lives are precious, unless they're babies, unless they're unborn, unless they're old people, unless they're veterans. We love minorities, who are the majority worldwide, but we got to have world government to save them, even though it's killing them. It's like calling the Patriot Act the Patriot Act. Or we discredit global warming being man-made, and we're actually cooling now for at least a decade. The cooling stopped 17 years ago. I mean, the warming stopped 17 years ago, and then the cooling started a decade ago. So they just call it climate change now. Who can debate that there is climate change continually? It's the only thing that's constant. It's a war on language and a war on words where you can't even communicate with people. And even the supposedly intellectual, even the so-called informed, are a very small percentage of people that actually read books or read the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, or who watch Sunday news shows It's the informed in this country that are even aware of the political process and know who the names are and who the players are, but that itself is a completely false projection and staged to an almost complete extent. So you've got people within these artificial envelopes, these artificial little bubble matrices, walled off from the real reality that the globalists write about in their own books, their own publications, foreign affairs. It's all there. How do I continually know what they're going to do next, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, decade in, decade out? Because they've told us what they're going to do, and they've done it over and over again in third world and old world countries that they had control of, so we know the exact formulae that they will slightly tweak with their anthropologists and sociologists and behaviorists for the particular country that they launch. We know the enemy profile. We know their modus operandi. We have assessed them. And you would think it's a weakness that they're so predictable, but see, their response is, hey, the public isn't even conscious. So what if you're awake? So what if you're aware? It's like being one awake person at a sports stadium of lobotomized children. You can't even communicate with them. You can't get them out of the trance. They don't even know what you're talking about. They're on the news today saying, who could have thought Greece would default? They're on the news saying, who could have thought ISIS would suddenly launch attacks in Africa and the Middle East and France? Terror attacks in France, Tunisia, and Kuwait. We have brutal footage and audio of this. I don't even know how I'm going to air it. Our listeners forget who exposed the fact that al-Qaeda was synthetic and completely run by Western intelligence on 9/11. Then I analyze the new al-Qaeda and the new Syrian state they were building in the last 4 or 5 years, giving Libya as a base to take down Africa to al-Qaeda, giving Syria part of it as a base to take down the Middle East. Western governments all financing it. We laid out exactly 4 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, exactly 1 year ago, exactly a month ago, over and over again, ad nauseum, that ISIS is a real terror threat, a multi-100,000 person army recruited and funded by the West with useful idiot bots who actually think they're fighting for, quote, Islam, that are going to be allowed to attack the entire Western world and the Middle East. They're meant to take over and conquer the Middle East and much of Africa as a proxy front for the globalists under Saudi Arabia and Turkey's control. Here, they're going to attack, be repulsed and defeated, but that'll be used for the next decade of expanded police state. Oh, Alex now says the Muslim threat's real, even though he said for all these years it was synthetic. It was always real, but it was manufactured. Now it's not manufactured, it's bred in a pen and turned loose. Like I said, if I go to my neighbor and put 3 rattlesnakes in his bed, I didn't bite my neighbor, but I'm an accomplice to it. I put the rattlesnakes in the bed. If I go dump 100 black widows in your bed, and you go and get in there, I don't control the black widows. I just know what they're going to do. If I put you in a pen with 15 starving wolves, I don't run the wolves. They'd bite my hand too, but I control the environment and the paradigm. That's the new world order. That's what you face. They're going to kick, folks, they will shoot down jet airliners with missiles. And the media will sit there and never say they were giving them in the war against Syria, that in Libya, Benghazi. You heard it all here. And I'm not bragging. You can learn all this too. The mainstream media can learn it. But they're not really smart. They're not really informed, and they read off teleprompters. Whether it's Fox or CNN or MSNBC, they get up there, and they read off a teleprompter. They're given their talking points, and they go, gee, who could have imagined ISIS would have done this? Well, the West will do something now. The West? You mean the criminals that run our country? Who could have imagined? That's the headlines. I've got them here on the stack. No one could see the Greece crisis coming. No one. There have been 3 so-called bailouts of Greece that were really to the bankers that set this up. Almost all the debt in Greece, 90+% of it, is not the Greeks' own debt. Their government signed on in the EU deal, and part of the banker bailouts to sign on to all this. They've had massive tax increases, you name it. They're now going into free fall. They're meant to implode countries and have them leave the EU, and then they're going to form a new global union to, quote, stabilize the 3 unions. They always meant to create 3 unions to depress their sub-states, then out of that implosion, weld them all together as the fix. Now, how did I know this 20 years ago? Because I read Barry Goldwater's book. He was in the meetings. He exposed it. I read the statements of David Rockefeller. It's all planned. I read the opposition to it, and I read the people that were for it. If I was in a war, which I am, I would read the enemy's own documents. They're so arrogant, their battle plans are public. And they don't give us their battle plans because they're fake to throw us off, or there's disinfo in them, like the British with their ultra system let the Germans know. No, it's beyond that. They are so arrogant, they are operating uncloaked, attacking us at point-blank range. When we come back, inside the Greek crisis, the world is defenseless against the next financial crisis, warns BIS. Stay with us. I'm going to say this very, very slowly for new listeners. I don't mean this in a condescending way, but the denial has to end right now. You can go to Google and type IMF World Bank documents leaked 2002. The BBC covered part of them. Then they told Greg Palast, we're going to fire you if you do any more pieces on this, basically. He got pulled back from it. Former top federal fraud investigator that went to work for the BBC. And in it, the IMF and World Bank were planning the takedown of the West next. They'd already taken over the third world, Latin America, Africa, and much of Asia, through fraud. And it talked about how they would then depress economies, have the country sign on to debt, do bailout after bailout that actually puts the countries in debt to the mega banks when the companies themselves are being bailed out by the countries. And the public is so illiterate is the proper word, total illiteracy when it comes to basic financial systems. But even when you tune into CNBC, that's all within the paradigm of the controlled economic order. So that itself is not how it really operates. And now they're talking about Greece could face social unrest soon. Wilbur Ross warns. Who could have thought that? Then they use the civil unrest. This is in the IMF World Bank documents that got leaked. BBC. They then use that unrest that goes on for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, to then have a savior run for office who then comes in and brings in even more control. And they'll do this over and over and over again, consolidating power to keep the people poor. The European Union on Friday proposed, you can pull this up, a VAT tax on all tourism in Greece to, quote, pay off their debts. Now, they've already raised taxes so much that it's making it prohibitive to go to Greece because there's so many taxes on hotels, transportation, and tourist-related institutions. And the government itself said, why would you want that as part of your EU system when you know that will stall our economy? Well, remember what they did 5 years ago in Greece, and 3 years ago in Greece, and 2 years ago. Remember? They had them raise all these other taxes that didn't help the country, caused tax revenues to go down, so their debts even got bigger. They know that. Kennedy cut taxes by 50% in the general tax bracket. Tax receipts did what the next year? Went up over 40%. What happened in the second year? They doubled. They blew us head off at that point. Greece debt talks, EU chief betrayed. And they just found the Reuters article. Go back to that for TV viewers. Reuters, Greeks draw the line. Greek tourism draws line in the sand over tax hikes. Creditors want Greece to pass a VAT, value-added tax. They also want to scrap tax breaks for island resorts. Critics say the hikes are counterproductive. Really? Tourists warned over Greek bank troubles. Let me read to you what they're doing in Greece. Now, you probably heard this here, if you're a regular listener, 5,000 times. I'm not exaggerating. I'm sorry. This is for new listeners. We're trying to save the country and the world. The bank runs have started. They're not letting people get their money out. They're calling for banning cash. Everything we told you, because it's an exact plan. Greg Palast wasn't allowed to tell more in his first BBC report. He came here no less than 10 times. I put it in my book, Descent into Tyranny. You can go read it. It's at prisonplanet.tv, the ebook, when you're a member. But the book, if you want, it's free online too. Whatever. It's just all in one place at prisonplanet.tv. The whole plan to bring down economies. In fact, can somebody find me? I didn't think to do this. It's sold out years ago, but Descent into Tyranny, I think it's in that bookshelf back there. Flip it to the end. Near the end's the warning and the transcripts and the documents on the global plan to bring down the 3 mega regions and to bring in a world government. Remember, this is before 2008. The book was published in 2002. Now, here are the headlines. The world is defenseless against the final... That was a Freudian slip. The world is defenseless against the next financial crisis, warns Bank of International Settlements. London Telegraph. Paul Joseph Watson. Greek crisis. EU showed contempt for allowing Greeks to vote on referendum. The Europe group has disdain for any elections. Greece will collapse this week and people will be terrified. Jim Rogers, smart guy. Greece closes banks ahead of referendum. A default in the debt payment this week could mean Greece will leave the Eurozone. UPI. Global market slump as Greece closes banks and debts talks falter. Greece's debt crisis sends stocks falling around the globe. And then, of course, my book, Descent into Tyranny, I'm going to try to find a section from 13 years ago where we lay it all out. Before I get back into Greece and how it affects everyone here, here's my book, Descent into Tyranny, if you're a TV viewer. By the way, radio listeners, whenever you get a chance on your smartphone, your Droid, whatever, or when you're at home, can go to Infowars.com/show and find the free feed to the daytime radio/TV transmission. There's some confusion. That is not subscription. There's a better feed at prisonplanet.tv. What is subscription is the nightly news, the films, the ebooks, and so much more. Because a lot of the documentaries and things that are on there that aren't mine, I had to pay to be able to put on there. So it's 20 years of material, been around 15 years, and it just gets better and better. It's 15 cents a day. 20 people can use each membership. We just charge so that we can have money to fund the platform, but it's at cost. That's why we used to only let one person use a membership, and as bandwidth got cheaper, 5 people, 10 people. Now it's 20 people can use each membership. And then if you ever try to log in and can't, and 20 people are on, well, praise God, get a second membership. It's $5.95 a month. And my book, Descent into Tyranny, is on the site. And mainly this book, which is a great read, it's been out of print for about 8-9 years. World bankers feed off crumbling economies. And that's one of the chapters towards the end. And it's basically some documents and a transcript of a Greg Palast interview on March 4th, 2002. And we break down how they were going to bring down the rest of the third world, then set their sights on engineering a collapse in the West. And then they use the collapse, claiming that they're the stabilizers and the guys there to the rescue, to come in and basically have the people sign their rights away. World bankers feed off crumbling economies. Such an important article at prisonplanet.tv. In fact, we ought to go pull a transcript of this. They've got programs online at Scrib where you can just pull the text from the book and put it into an article at Infowars.com to parallel it to what's happening today. And again, I don't get up here and show you where we predicted things over and over again to toot our horn. It's not hard. Every time, of the last 3 times, really there's been 4, but 3 big, quote, bailouts. They've said this will stabilize and fix Greece, and all it does is make people start starving in the streets to where the country is so dangerous now and in so much squalor now, when it was a very safe, nice country, that more and more tourists aren't going there. And the globalists will just do this for a decade until the country totally collapses. They'll come in and buy it all up and then stabilize it after with a police state, and then tourism will come back, but the people will wake up homeless on the island their forefathers populated. To paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, if we ever allow central banks to issue and control the currency, our children will wake up homeless on the continent their forebears conquered. And so now you got lines of people trying to pull cash, just like in the U.S. or just like in the EU. It's all the same globalists run it. There's less than 2% physical cash for just the money that is in circulation of the people. There are hundreds of times derivatives digital money. So for every multi-$1,000 or euro out there, there's maybe €1 or $1 in existence. No one really knows. But in the mid-'90s, we passed the point of 3% cash in the banks for physical deposits. Last time Ron Paul was on, or maybe it was the time before, he talked about it's probably less than 1%. No one knows. And he was on the banking committee in the House. They can't get answers. 1%, 2%, whatever it is, think about how dangerous that is. And if you go to Bloomberg, they have footage showing the people lined up, pulling their cash out. And now the banks are saying, we're going to stop letting you get your cash out. Is there any surprise that just a few weeks ago they were pushing in Europe to start restricting cash and saying it's for your safety and the rest of it? No, it's so the globalists can do a bail-in. Because they're saying if this referendum goes through and Greece doesn't sign on to more austerity, they'll be, quote, kicked out of the euro, and the globalist banks that set up the euro to take political control from the people, to conquer them, just like TPP, they will go in and they will claw the money directly out of the accounts, just like they did in Cyprus and other areas. I mean, the globalist, if your, quote, state or your country doesn't pay a debt, they'll go in with sanctions and grab the assets overseas, like they're doing to Russia. And not over debts, but because Russia is defending its population that's indigenous to eastern Ukraine in the Crimea. Again, not saying Russia is faultless, but they didn't start the war. They didn't overthrow Ukraine like George Soros, the same group of bankers. And they're now having their assets all over the world seized. Their companies shut down that Americans and Brits and Germans and other people work in. Remember WikiLeaks? When they thought Assange was trying to fly into Germany and other countries, and NATO would force Russian aircraft down to search him? That's the New World Order, folks. So there's nowhere to run. And they bring down Russia and a few other countries. Sure, you're jumping out of the fire into the frying pan, but the fire is going to get a lot hotter when there's no firewalls. States are like firewalls or like bulkheads in a ship for water. If you don't have them, one leak will bring you down. Once there's global government, folks, there'll be nowhere to run. And we know the people running this world government are the maximum alpha tyrants the world has ever seen. They are engineering financial collapse all over the world. We sit here arrogantly living off of unlimited QE that work for Zimbabwe, work for Deutschland, work for countries in history, but not forever. While the globalists run to the exits, buy gold, buy armored redoubts. I don't know when the shoe's going to drop. I don't know when they're going to drop the full hammer, but they're already doing it all over the world. The world is in a global meltdown. There's revolutions and horrible stuff happening everywhere, and the globalists, right when a country's about to have a peaceful revolution, they'll trigger a terror group or an operative group to take over. Ukraine, Libya, the cases are legion. This is the destabilization force. This is the program. The world is defenseless against the next financial crisis, warns Bank of International Settlements. And that's the big bank between the IMF and World Bank and the private central banks, that it makes the decisions. It decides. That's the top of the New World Order banking structure. The import-export banks, same group. Monetary policymakers have run out of room to fight the next crisis with interest rates unable to go lower, the BIS warns. Oh, they've run out of room to save you. They're working so hard. We get their actual documents. I have Stiglitz, who leaves as the chief World Bank economist, on in 2002. Palace got him on. And he says, yes, it's a planned program to impoverish the world. Yes, it's by design. I mean, that's directly from the people on the inside. The chief economist of the World Bank would not go along with this and knew how dangerous it was 13 years ago and got away at a safe distance. The world will be unable to fight the next global financial crash as central banks have used up their ammunition trying to tackle the last crisis. But they said at Davos 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and this year, they have a way to fix it. A global emergency authority using the SDR or something like it as a global new digital cash, but it'll be backed up 10% in gold or other metals. And still you'll have your currencies, but they'll be pegged to that. And that new unlimited Q, global Q, let me coin it global Q, that will have to have close integration. The governments will all have to do what the new group says, just like Greece did what they were told. It didn't work, but it doesn't matter. It worked to consolidate control. This is how they do it. The world will be unable to fight the next global financial crash as central banks have used up their ammunition trying to tackle the last crisis. The Bank of International Settlements has warned. They're out of ammo protecting us. Oh, my gosh. The very private banks that own this are funding breaking up the family, taking your guns, making you go on Prozac drugs, forced inoculations. I mean, this is the devil. The so-called central bank of central banks, see, the top of the pyramid, which are private, launched a scathing critique of global monetary policy, which they run. Adolf Hitler launched a scathing attack of himself as the chief judge at Nuremberg. The so-called central bank of central banks launched a scathing critique of the global monetary policy in its annual report. The BIS claimed that central banks have backed themselves into a corner after repeatedly cutting interest rates to shore up their economies. These low interest rates have in turn fueled economic booms and encouraged excessive risk-taking to set everybody up. Booms have then in turn to bust, which policymakers have responded to with even lower rates. And they come in with their answer, which we'll tell you about more coming up. But let's continue. New York Times. Who could have imagined? I'm going to get to those articles in a moment. Who could have seen ISIS attacking? Oh, I wonder who talked about it every day. Oh, as a real threat, set up to be a real threat, because then they'll save us from the threat, just like they're going to save us from this. Greece's debt crisis sends stocks falling around the globe. Paris, stocks slumped modestly on Monday as the opening of Wall Street after markets in Asia and Europe. Let's pull up CNBC and see what it is now. We're battered by worries that the Greek financial crisis would prove contagious and Chinese investors endured another topsy-turvy session. And then it goes over all of it. Cash withdrawals and hoarding as default looms over Greece. Yeah, the conspiracy kooks the last few years in Greece started cashing their paychecks. So a lot of companies got orders to only let you take automatic transfer so they could take whatever they wanted out. And they called them conspiracy theorists and hoarders. But now they're right. See, being right more than other people is a conspiracy theorist. Cash withdrawals and hoarding as default looms over Greece. The sun shone as usual with clouds floating above the brilliant blue sky above Acropolis. Hotels were mostly full. Shops sold T-shirts and cafes along the narrow alleyways. Tourist districts were bustling. Not for long after the new tourism taxes go in. It was a seemingly normal Sunday, except it was anything but normal. For many people in Athens, it was time to prepare for an approaching storm. A short walk from the tourist area, a line of people waited to withdraw cash, and it goes over it. Greece closes banks ahead of referendum, UPI. Oh, they're having a bank holiday. Joe Slintsay talks about a holiday. It's not that normal holiday. You're out water skiing, out having fun. It's a holiday. It's a Patriot Act. Do-do-do. It's a new freedom initiative. It's a Affordable Care Act that doubles and triples prices. But it says affordable. I'm convinced you can sell to trendies buckets of horse manure. Tell them it's pumpkin pie that had a trendy on the front of it, or maybe a man in drag with a mustache. That's the coolest thing. And you do that, it's over. I don't know why that's the top trendy thing for like 10 years in Austin. Now spread worldwide, a guy in a dress with a mustache. But I guess Leslie is the global icon. The globals actually chose him. They said, you will be the example of everyone. I had an office by Leslie's house. Made a big living off of his professional homeless. He died a few years ago. I don't like to speak ill of the dead. I'm kind of digressing, but I'm going to just be quiet. Anyways, the point is, it's kind of like I know a celebrity. You know? Greece closes banks ahead of referendum. Greek banks will remain closed until after a July 5th referendum on the terms it has been offered for receiving a fresh bailout from creditors, which never pays down the debt. And they just stop the crisis for a year and then come back with more taxes. ATMs across Greece were mobbed until the government assessed a €60 limit, $66 on withdrawals per day by individuals. Saturday, Eurozone creditors refused to extend the existing bailout. And now you see all across the United States, you go in to like get a couple $1,000s out, you know, to give family at Christmas, or, you know, got a bunch of little cousins coming to town, get a couple $100s out. You get $1,000 out, they act like you're a criminal now. Getting you ready for it. And so it begins. Greek banks get shut down for a week as the Greek exit is now probable. Infowars.com, Michael Snyder. Capital controls within a monetary union are a contradiction in terms. The Greek government opposes the very concept, but the banks run things and are now doing it. But don't worry, New York Times is reporting, Puerto Rico's governor says island's debts are not payable. As Puerto Rico signals preparations for collapse, the 51st state. You like the New World Order? You ain't seen nothing yet. I want to open the phones up in the first 30 minutes on this issue and on Vladimir Putin coming to the West and saying, look, you've been behind Al-Qaeda and ISIS. It's time to put up or shut up. Let's take them out. And we've got video. Mark Dice as usual. It's on drudgereport.com, Infowars.com. 7 out of 10 people signed his petition to ban the American flag. And they're talking about digging up dead Confederate generals out of cemeteries and removing them. I mean, nobody's ever done that. I saw one case where they dug up an English king and chopped his head off. They did an execution of the dead body. I forget which one that was. I think that was the guy that cheated on the Magna Carta. I'm going from memory. Will you guys look up English king that was dug up and beheaded? Or I think they drew and quartered his dead body. I mean, that was another one. The point is, this is total mental illness. Now in war memorabilia shops, Joe Biggs saw this weekend at the gun show, where they've got British flags, New Zealand flags, Afrikaner flags, just everything you can imagine. Nazi flags, I mean, whatever. American flags, they're there saying we're selling out, we're not going to sell them anymore. We don't mean this is racist, this is meant to be historical. I mean, we're conquered by foreign banks. They're absolutely destroying us, but we're obsessing because the media said so over Caitlyn Jenner and the Confederate battle flag. And then when they killed one and shot the other fugitive in New York, the governor came out like they just discovered a new planet. Some of the bombshell headlines at Infowars.com we're going to be covering. Goldman Sachs boss, Bilderberg member, Peter Sutherland, says Europe needs more refugees from Africa and Syria. So they collapse Africa and Syria, on record, and then bring in unlimited numbers who don't even have skills to then run around and burn things down because they don't feel wanted or accepted. And I understand Europeans are supposed to go home, but where are they supposed to go to? The North Pole? And again, the leftists then play politics and get everybody in Europe just bowing down to the foreigners. Yes, we'll pay for everything. Yes, yes, yes. While the globalists are just doing it to conquer the countries. Terror talk, Steve Watson. Politicians, former CIA head, FBI, DHS, all ramp up warnings for July 4th and say we've got to give up our rights. And they say they believe that terrorists are in American basements. That's a quote. And that attacks are imminent. And then if we do get attacked, no one will say, why'd the government create ISIS, fund them, and let them in? Because there's a suspension of reality here. Mother arrested, charged with child endangerment for letting 7-year-old play in the park. Well, that's nothing compared to the 11-year-old. His parents were late getting home till 6. He got home from 4:30 from school. He was in a gated, fenced backyard playing basketball. And they took him from his parents and indicted him for child endangerment. Because they can call anything child endangerment. It's amazing. But the foreign banks can own jet aircraft and ship the drugs in and out of the country publicly. They can be in the news. Nobody gets in trouble. Before I go any further, when I tell you stuff's selling out, we never know what's going to be a bestseller. Everything we promote and push at InfoWarsLife.com helps fund our operations. It's the purest, most high-quality organics we can get. A lot of it's just hiding in plain view, stuff that people aren't promoting because things always have to be the newest, newfangled deal. A lot of it's just common sense. A lot of it is old recipes combined with new technology. But the key is the purity and the concentration of it. Our stuff is concentrated, whether it's the colloidal silver or whether it's the liver shield or whether it's the super male vitality or whether it's secret 12. The problem is we don't have the money here to produce a whole bunch and then just sit on it because we never know. The public's not fickle. You just can't judge the public's what they're going to be buying for some reason. Liver shield sold out. Looks like 5 to 6 weeks. Told you that was happening. OccuPower sold out. It could be 8 weeks till we have that. Child Ease could be 2 months till we have that. Prostagard sold out. These are all excellent formulas, very competitively priced. I appreciate all your support, but we do limited runs of these from 3 of the top manufacturers in the country, including one with Dr. Group, but 2 other major household names if you're informed on this stuff. So when I tell you Survival Shield X2 is going to be selling out soon, we're selling out of this proprietary iodine very quickly. Group is close to hopefully getting more of the deep earth crystals. But you have to go to, I don't want to get into all of it, but it's very complex to go in on the market, contracts. You got to bid to try to get these aggregates that are very rare. And by rare, deep earth iodine's not rare. The clean stuff is. And then most people aren't going to drill, you know, $5–10 million drilling operations to go 12,000 feet to get it. I mean, it costs millions of dollars. So that's why it's hard to get, because you got to find the weirdo companies that are out drilling in the right area that will go for this. I mean, it's finite stuff because people aren't drilling for it. We're the weirdos that, you know, understand how important it is and go out and get it. If you want Survival Shield X2, secure yours today, InfoWarsLife.com. InfoWarsLife.com. And the whole family of products, InfoWarsStore.com. All right, I started hyperventilating a bit in the last segments because it is mind-blowing to watch what we've known is coming for a very long time, the next phase of the globalist takeover. And I will tell you, it is surreal to watch the autocratic globalist who've done what they're now doing to Europe, to now do what they're doing in Europe to so many other countries, and to know it's criminal, to know it's premeditated, but because they fly around in jet helicopters and $150 million jets and live in palaces and are guarded by men in black uniforms, everyone just feels like they're untouchable gods who can just get away with whatever they want. And so much of ruling populations was always about that. Being in the big fancy palace with the drums and the horns, and being behind the big armored gates and the biggest, toughest men in the fanciest uniforms with their sharp, shiny spears and swords guarding you. And some autocratic elites wanted prosperous populations and kept taxes low, and renaissances came in different parts of societies and histories, and different kings were known as the just or the ideal king. But those were the minority. In most centralized systems, the enforcers of the king, even if the king or queen wasn't a bad person, set up their own little private empires and built societies based on oppression and based on gangsterism. So the world is turning away from the Renaissance economy that we never truly embraced or attained. But nevertheless, our course has been turned from that pole star in another direction to hell. I'd rather go that direction. We're rapidly being pulled into a big economic, cultural, spiritual, medical black hole based on lies, based on distortion, where you're only given a place at the table if you work against what's wholesome and good. Because instinctively they want to bring down what's wholesome and good, even though they feed off of it, because they're jealous of it and they're diametrically opposed to it, and they have historical and genetic memories that the good has defeated them over and over again. When I say them, I mean corrupt people throughout history, all the same. And that's why they argue, when I talk about genetics, I don't mean a black bloodline or a white bloodline or an Asian bloodline, but within blacks, Asians, whites, whatever. Everybody knows that you can say, oh, no, don't get that dachshund. It comes from really mentally ill biters. That's really a screwed up breeder. They got problems. Oh, this breeder's wonderful. Nice, sweet, smart dogs. Well, it's the same thing with humans. You've got a race between good, loving creators who just want to be healthy and happy and care about others and who don't think about power, and people that do want the power and who crave it and who aren't going to let you go work 9 to 5 and put your kids through college and then go out to the lake cottage on the weekend. They're going to destroy your world because they're going to conquer you, because they know that things are going to get so bad, you're going to finally wake up and get together and bring them down. And so they're there working, always working. When we come back, I'll give the number out, and we're going to get the latest Mark Dice video. It's one of the worst ever. The collapse of Greece has been designed for over a decade. The EU was set up, according to the founders of the EU, to be a system to destroy national sovereignty and bankrupt the individuals down to the family level to consolidate power and control. This fourth or fifth, depending on how you look at it, so-called bailout of Greece is mainly for debts owed by Greece because they signed on to prop up the EU and onto the larger EU-wide debts. Do they have big pension funds? Do they have some problems? Certainly. But there shouldn't be an EU system trying to trump what Greece can do. And now they have bank runs. And now they've shut the banks down. And they're calling it a holiday. And they say, oh, it's not to stop bank runs, even though they're already happening. You're allowed to withdraw 66 euros a day until we close it and the bank holiday's been announced for tomorrow. $66 a day, or it's $60, 66 euros is what it calculates out to. This is their plan. It's why they want to get rid of cash where you can't even use it, because then they can tax your accounts, do bail-ins, control everything you do, and social engineer to a level never before seen. And the technocratic bankers like Bloomberg are always saying, we just really need to be able to decide what you buy and what you do. They say all this with a straight face. And then our economic system will work if we can just get rid of any underground economy, make you only go to big box stores, ban farmers markets, make you grow GMO. And the EU was set up first. Now the American Union was set up by stealth under trade deals that are secret. And now they're setting up the Asian Union under the TPP, which we have the internal documents from, and is just that, the merger of the three super unions. They're already merging the Atlantic Union right now with it, and the Atlantic Union is the EU and the American Union. This is just an incredible time to be alive. Greece closes banks ahead of referendum, UPI. 800-259-9231. 800-259-9231 is the toll-free number. We're talking about Greece, world financial consolidation of power. Will this be the big global meltdown coming up this winter or early next year? It may be. Or will it just be another global crisis that they engineer to get even more power and more bailouts while blaming it on Greece? 800-259-9231. And then coming up, Putin urges all to fight ISIS group and back Syria's Assad, who's been fighting al-Qaeda and now ISIS. We're going to be breaking that down. We're also going to look at the ACLU now not supporting religious freedom of speech, saying restrict it. See, they only used an open society to where we accepted all this, quote, alternative stuff. Now we're not going to be tolerated. No matter what your view is. Don't believe in man-made global warming? Don't want to pay Al Gore a tax? Boom, you're in trouble. Don't want to hire a trainee to be your Catholic school teacher? Boom, you're shut down. And we're not joking. Don't want to have a Catholic church or your Protestant church pay for abortions? Boom, you're shut down. This is the opposite of tolerance. It's the big communal system. It's the great tyranny. You have a right to put on a dress, but you do not have a right to not have foreign banks destroy your country. This is the great joke of social engineering, where they made being trendy the new religion, and now people, it's perfect, because they can change the dogma day to day, hour to hour, with the new accepted reality, whatever that may be. And so they only, with a quasi-puritanical nation like the U.S., that was really always piratical and wild right under the surface, they make it sex and, quote, deviance to be the bait so that we accept whatever the new changes are. And now we've opened the door up to whatever they want. It's politically incorrect to let your 11-year-old play basketball in the backyard. You'll be arrested. You let your 7-year-old daughter in your small town run across as you watch her out the window and play at the park like I did. I used to go to my grandparents' house. It was in Hyde Park in Austin. And I'd be 6, 7 years old, and I'd stand with them during the summer, and I'd run across the street. You guys look up the name of the park in Austin, in Hyde Park. It'll pop in my head in a minute. I never got arrested. My parents never got arrested. I never got the CPS taking me away. What changed in America? It wasn't that crime went up. When I was a me lad, when I was like in 1980, 81, 6, 7 years old, playing at the park across the street from Grandma's house. I don't know if it's Shipe Park. I forget. I could call my mom. What changed? How did it change? I mean, I grew up on a golf course in Rockwall, Texas. We moved out there when I was about 6, and I ran around all day, when I was not at school with my friends. Well, we'd drag lumber off and climb up a tree and, off in the woods and try to build a fort. This is the domestication and the takeover, turning us into a bunch of mindless idiots that if you say it's racist, we want to ban it, or accept government-run health care, or you're not trendy, people will go along with it. In fact, speaking of that, the article's up on Infowars.com. U.S. citizens signed petition to ban American flag and replace it with a pyramid to signify the New World Order. Here is that report from Mark Dice.
We help to support banning the American flag. We're issuing a new American flag. Hold on. And a lot of people are offended by the American flag. It has a history of imperialism and racism as well. So we're having a petition to implement a new American flag. You helped us sign the petition to issue a new American flag for a new world order.
It sounds like a great idea, but I do not like to sign things.
So you think? I mean, you can understand. A lot of people are offended by the. A lot of people are offended by the American flag. It has a history of oppression and imperialism, and birth date there to support issuing a new American flag for the new world order. I think it's about time we do that. Wouldn't you agree? Maybe something with like an all-seeing eye and a pyramid on it, or just something to represent the new world order. Thank you for supporting that.
All right, brother.
Part of the new world order is to basically ban the old American flag, and we're going to put up a new American flag over the Capitol to signify the new world order, but we just needed some more signatures. Thanks for supporting the new American flag. So we're pulling down the Confederate flag. And
back up to that last guy. That fella is the quintessential modern tough guy trendy. There's different types of trendies, hundreds of different variants, but just knows how to act tough, knows how to go, yeah. And that's what our nation is. It's just a bunch of guys walking around acting tough. And they don't want to know what's going on. They just want to look cool to other people and put on a front. But if you look at these guys' eyes every time, they just have this weak look at them. It's so pathetic. And he signs it to ban the American flag. 7 out of 10 did. Here it is.
Orders to basically ban the old American flag, and we're going to put up a new American flag over the Capitol to signify the new world order, but we just needed some more signatures. Thanks for supporting the new American flag. We're pulling down the Confederate flag in a lot of cities to end the era of racism, and President Obama has suggested that we issue a new American flag altogether to signify the new unified America.
What does it look like? Or we don't know yet?
Well, something with a pyramid and like a rainbow pyramid or something. It looks really cool. But we still need a few more signatures
to
signify the unity in the New World Order. Print, birth it, and a signature. It's a new American flag for the New World Order. The old signature there. The old stars and stripes just don't sit right with a lot of people, and so we're going to be banning the old American flag. And the new flag will have like a pyramid with like a rainbow stripes in it. It looks really cool. So I appreciate your supporting that. Thank you. A lot of people would want to take down the Confederate flag to sort of stop with the racism, and a lot of people feel the American flag is offensive to the minorities and some of the immigrants. So we're trying to issue a new flag for the new America, but we need a few more signatures here.
I'm all for the red, white, and blue, man.
Schools everywhere they're banning
to sign our petition to issue a new American flag for the new America. You know, the Confederate flags are coming down to end the era of racism, and it's time to implement a new American flag for the new America.
The key to this is you just say something that's trendy and it's politically correct, they go for it.
Getting some signatures here. Print, birth it, and a signature.
I almost had that mindless smile.
The old stars and stripes represent the old world, imperialistic America, and this petition's going to implement the new American flag.
I'm part of the winning team. Pull it all down. Dig up their dead body.
Thank you for supporting that.
Throw away the Confederate general's body. I want to get the racists.
Another signature there. What we were thinking is maybe like a pyramid or something to represent the new world order and the new America. And
see, the key is just acting smug.
To replace, the petition is to replace the current American flag. It's a new flag for the New World Order. Wouldn't you agree? It's time for that.
I'm helpless.
Appreciate your support. Thank you. It's time to replace the old stars and stripes and issue a new flag for the new America. And
he wants to do it. Oh, yeah.
Just to signify that America has changed, we're going to be replacing the old Stars and Stripes flag as well.
Let's do it,
And birthday to support the new American flag.
Full video, without me talking over it, at Infowars.com. And these are not staged. He goes out and shows everybody he talks to. Going back thousands of years ago, private money-changing institutions would learn that they could issue more receipts for what the actual gold or silver was in their vaults. And the current Rothschild family started doing that about 400 years ago in Germany and became the dominant banking family in the world. Well, now the globalists have come out with derivatives and things that don't even have any connection to reality. It's not like you have, say, a ton of gold and you put out loans backed up for 10 tons of gold. That was the old rule, 10 to 1, fractional reserve banking. Now it's 1,000 to 1 or more. Truly mind-boggling. And so their answer is a global government as the new bubble and the final bubble. Because it's never meant to come back after that. There's going to be a war against humanity, a consolidation to fight the ongoing collapse forever. I want to go to your phone calls, Ben and John and David and Sam and grandmother. And coming up at about 40 after, he'll be with us into the next hour. Lionel from Lionel Media, great commentator, constitutional lawyer, will be joining us. But right now, let's go to John in Texas. Go ahead, John. You're on the air.
Hi, Alex.
Welcome.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Alex? Okay. Don't you think it's sort of fishy, Alex, that all this demonization of Russia and Vladimir Putin, yet we're still going on space missions together? Don't you think that's a little fishy?
I know some people are saying that this is all staged, and I know that the West had a deal with Russia and the Carnegie Endowment to fight Hitler. I know our government helped put the Bolsheviks in 1917. That's all public. And if you're a new listener, that's mainline history. Maybe 1 in 500 people knows it, but it's mainline history. Our government with the British financed the takedown of the czars and the nightmare that was Bolsheviks. But we're really fighting them over Ukraine. There really is a split with Russia. Putin really did arrest a bunch of the oligarchs. I know Putin represents a big Russian mafia, KGB power bloc that decided they could be more powerful, not under communism, but under quasi-capitalism. I judge a tree by its fruits, though. They have youth camps trying to get men and women to get together and get married. They are trying to tell people to have children. They get on TV and say the globalists are carrying out eugenics against their country. I know a lot of the Russian leadership, because I've confirmed this and it's come out in the news there, listen to this show. And they really like Ron Paul. So I think there's a battle for the heart and soul of Russia right now. But that's a very complex question you raise. But I just think that there's a takedown of Russia happening right now, an attempt. Like, of course, there's backroom deals with China as well. But the globalists do battle with each other, and I think there are 3 major power blocks, the Chinese, the Russians, and the Anglo-American establishment, with the Anglo-Americans being the dominant group. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, I want to believe Vladimir Putin. I'm hoping he's turned against the New World Order, but still, going way back, I was in the John Birch Society. I know a whole lot about this stuff. And the John Birch Society, their website said Vladimir Putin's still a communist. That's what they say. So, but still, you got to keep our eyes open, because there's always a chance of a double cross, Alex. These guys, they'll paint one picture and stab you in the back with another. So we got to keep our eyes open. That's it.
Oh, I totally agree with you. And listen, Russia's not invading us. Russia's not trying to take my guns. Russia's not opening my borders. Russia is not trying to bring down Greece right now. I mean, Egypt just sided with Russia because our government threw out their government that was, pro-religious freedom and pro-stability, and put Al-Qaeda basically in charge. So our government is the worst thing the modern world's ever seen because it's not our government. And that's basically where I'm coming from. I just don't want to have a war with Russia. Doesn't mean I choose the side of Russia. Great questions, great comments. See, I want to go to more calls, but this is such a complex issue. I'm going to come back from break, go to Ben, grandmother, Wild, Chris, and then we're going to go to our guest. He'll be with us at 40 after. He'll be with us 40 minutes in the next hour. And we'll cover the waterfront with him. He's a smart fellow. State Department Memorandum 7277, Freedom from War, is a global disarmament treaty that was never ratified, but that we're under via UNESCO, which we did ratify. So they couldn't get us to ratify that, so we just said, we'll ratify the UNESCO treaty that then puts us under UNESCO to begin with. So there's many ways to skin a cat. And in that it says they're preparing the U.S. for the more comfortable merger with the Soviet Union under a global government. Now, I don't know if they're still following that old plan. All I know is they're trying to start a war with Russia, and they're overthrowing countries that border it. That's not smart. Most of us are, quote, international. I mean, we want to work with other countries. We want to travel. We like other cultures. Internationalism is how they sold globalism in the 50s. But it was just globalism. There are true forms of internationalism to get around globalism. Because the globalists are internationalists to be outside of their own system. So those are two different things, but they interlock. And now they're turning radical Islam loose all over the world, but saying it's politically incorrect to criticize it, even though you're going to lose your freedom in the name of staying safe from the very threat they engineered. And now Greece is in designed free fall, going into their fourth, quote, bailout, and nothing ever fixes it because there's too much debt. The system's designed to fail into the next system. Let's go to Grandmother in Washington. Wants to talk about Greece and the bond market. Go ahead. Welcome.
Hey, Alex. Sovereign Grandmother of Southwest Washington. My question is a little complicated. I have three parts to it. I'd appreciate a chance to get them all out. This relates to the survivability of a very large segment of the American population, which is the retirement community. Over the weekend, the head of PIMCO, the world's biggest holder of bonds, which, by the way, is the main financial instrument which props up retirement investments, put out this guy put out this ominous warning about whether or not the world should let Greece opt out. Meanwhile, for quite a while on your show and all over, including recently, a bunch of different thought leaders have identified the idea of Greece opting out as very possibly could be the trigger for the imminent collapse of the bond market, which we all know is coming. Okay, so...
Yes, ma'am, that's what we've been saying for several years.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now,
and
the question is this large segment of the American population who has the most wealth, we have the greatest transfer of wealth happening in the history of the world, probably.
Yes, the plan is to create a global crisis, take and nationalize, globalize your pension funds, your bank accounts, your stocks, and your bonds, and have them managed by an international secret body so that it's proprietary, so that it's safe and official and kosher. It has to be secret, like TPP. And you're like, wait, secret is not kosher. Secret is not good. They're like, no, this is upside down world. And then they will take control of all your wealth and manage it for you while taking large chunks of it. And by the time you get ready to retire, or by the time you're halfway through retirement, you'll have nothing left. But then if you criticize it, you're going to be called an insurgent, and a local combat group under global control will have to drop by and deal with you.
Well, they're counting on the bond bubble to fund this thing. And the bond bubble is getting ready to collapse. The bond bubble directly links to the survivability of a very large percentage of the population. It depends upon their investment. If you aren't living on your investments, on your, quote, retirement, like I and millions of other people are, you can't quite appreciate this point. So what I'm saying is, if the bond market is going to collapse, that is the equivalent of confiscation of our retirement income.
Yeah, ma'am, don't worry. They're not going to do that. They're going to only take part of it, then they're going to jack it back up and save it. Then they're going to take it again, and they're going to save it again until they maneuver everybody into them being in full control. Then they're going to take large chunks of it at a time, but people will be so conditioned to it going back up, like 2008, when they finally drop the hammer, people are going to submit. This is social engineering. They've done this in Argentina and Mexico and Nigeria and basically everywhere else, and in Europe and here before. But they're doing it all out this time. And so that's why you may be a new listener, I'm not sure, because, I mean, I understand you're concerned. And you sound like you almost think I'm not being serious enough about this. Believe me, I am. We had, 2 guests on last week, Max Kaiser and Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, both very smart financial people on this very subject. And we've got Nomi Prinz, former managing director of Goldman Sachs, who's been warning about this since 2002. She's coming on tomorrow. And we've got former Congressman Ron Paul on Thursday, who's warning of imminent collapse last week in a video he put out. He'll be joining us. So we're trying to stop this from happening. But they don't plan to take your bonds right away. They may let the bond market collapse at first and drive down a bunch of other stocks and things so they can buy some of them up. But they ride the pyramid up and down, up and down. They ride these things to consolidate control. I'm not going to give you advice on what I think you should do, but certainly raising the alarm bell does some good. The problem is the public is so financially illiterate that the general public just doesn't even understand. They're going to welcome the nationalization of retirement funds. They're going to welcome it. And so the question is, how do you educate people who will sign petitions to ban the American flag and who want to have Civil War generals dug up and thrown out of cemeteries? That's what they're obsessed with right now. That and men saying they're women. How do you communicate with people that mind-controlled, living in that scrambled of a world?
I think there is a divide and conquer tactic that isn't, I rarely hear discussed anywhere. We've talked about black, white, male, female, so on, but what I don't hear just being
generational
discussed is generational. And the thing is, this is why I called. Sure, plenty of people who aren't dependent upon their monthly retirement check will agree to restructuring the whole shebang.
You got it.
Dumping Social Security. That's the people that have jobs that are a working age. They are capable of working. What about the huge chunk? I'm not talking a small number of people who are dumbed down by the drugs that they're taking on one on top of another. We're the most drugged generation. The Vietnam generation is the most drugged generation in the history of the planet. They can't even think. We are about to get extracted.
You are. I appreciate your call. Having the instinct to not want to be a slave, to not have your retirement stolen is a good one. This is a very complex issue, to say the least. Yes, we have talked about generational, but probably not enough. It's one of the biggest. Playing the working population off against the retired population, pointing out how many of these pension funds, especially public, are untenable. I mean, there are hundreds of employees just in California, in a news article I read a few years ago, making above $500,000 a year. City managers making $800,000 a year in small towns. And in their pension, they're going to get $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. And people ask, well, that is untenable. What they've done is they've mixed all that fraud, all those fraudulent pensions in with the guy that worked at the water plant for 35 years and is going to get a pension paying him 50, 60 grand a year. And he paid into that. It just got matched by the county. But then the county invested in derivatives that were scam, so that's going to go belly up on those bonds. You're absolutely right. Then they're going to look at the general population and say, prop this up with new taxes, or grandma isn't going to get her pension. And people are going to get sick of it after they've done 5, 6, 7 rounds of new taxes and bail-ins to prop it up, and then finally they'll take it all. They know how to, they do this in other countries over and over again. We've been watching it in Greece. They will do it here. And how do you fix that? We have a spoiled, addled population in the West. We were so free, we became filthy rich. Fraud got involved. No one wants to give anything up. And so the elite are just going to take everything, build a police state to protect it, and they will be above the law, and you will be poor. That is the New World Order. In fact, you will starve to death if they can have their way. They want you dead. They believe it's good to bankrupt you. They believe it's good to have you in squalor because you don't contribute anything. And some people will say, well, I guess that's true. What do any of us contribute? Now you're in the mindset of the globalist, where we're losers, we're fallen, we're failed. The elite are in control, so they're the only ones that are enlightened, and they're going to save the earth from humanity while getting life extension technologies and power for themselves. That's a nice script, and they've written it. That's how British royalty 165 years ago underwrote this whole system. The full might of the British Empire was put behind this plan you're now seeing today. And I got to say, bravo, it's a lot more wild than any James Bond movie. What was that new film? I took my son to see it. It's with this British Secret Service guy in the agency that's so secret. What's it called?
I think it's The Kingsman.
Yeah, The Kingsman. I went and saw The Kingsman months ago when it came out. Then we're going to our guest. He'll be with us for the whole next hour. And in it, there's a billionaire who's convinced all the other major billionaires, including British Secret Service, to use a wavelength programming system, which DARPA actually has similar systems, to use devices, smart devices, to transmit a wavelength to make everybody kill each other. Now, really, they don't do that. They just transmit stuff that gives you cancer. But they're doing it to save the earth from humanity. And they have to tell you this in all these movies now because this is revelation of the method, because this show and others were finally getting people to listen and to understand the real paradigm. And so now it doesn't have the effect of being new for the public, where they actually go out and find out it's true. It's just, oh, that's a movie. That's like The Kingsman. Because, see, when you're unconscious, they just want to keep you unconscious. And so as long as the average person says, hey, this movie's waking people up, or this other movie's waking them up. No. That's if you're in a conscious, awake state. Then you get upset. But when you're unconscious in a mesmerized state, this is hypnosis 101, and you just get shown all this, it just gets you ready. Zombie apocalypse, total collapse of society, mass murder, death, humans are bad, the future doesn't need us, the world's going to be better without us, all these TV shows, all these movies, fiction, nonfiction, the novels, the books, the kids being taught, guilt, human guilt, the ultimate political correctness. Not how do we fix it, how do we make it better? No, no, no. Humans are failed, dumb us down, get rid of us. It's the cheater's way to get full control. That's where we're going. We're joined by Lionel of Lionel Media, constitutional lawyer, former prosecutor and defense attorney, TV and radio host. Follow him at Lionel Media, lionelmedia.com. He's an Emmy Award-winning television news decoder and legal analyst, licensed trial lawyer and former prosecutor. Again, he joins us now. I want to continue with your calls. He'll be with us the whole next hour. We'll intersperse calls with him, Ben, and others that are patiently holding. The Greek situation, the pulling down, the digging up of Confederate generals. Memphis mayor wants to literally dig up Confederate general and move him. Citizens signing petitions to ban the American flag. I told you it's next. Just all this craziness. ISIS attacks. Where should we begin, Lionel? I mean, what's front and center on your radar? Do you want to speak to the balkanization of the generations and what I was just getting into? Because They're getting us ready for another round of being held hostage to these shadowy global banks. The Bank of International Settlements is going to say from a secret meeting what we do. They're our boss. How many more trillions of U.S. taxpayer money will go over to Europe to prop something up that's meant to fail? Sucker born every minute. I mean, where do we start, Lionel?
You know, it's funny, Alex, there's so much. Just listening on hold to being on hold is just enormous. You know, I cannot begin, first of all, without mentioning the role of the mainstream media as potentiating our delusion. You know, one of the problems they say with taking, let's say, diazepam and alcohol or mixing certain drugs is that alcohol potentiates certain drugs. Well, the media potentiate our ignorance. And what they do is, like a baby bird is fed by its mother. The mother takes a worm, chews it, digests it, and then gives it back to the baby bird in a form the baby bird can handle based upon its own youth and novelty, in essence. Well, that's what our media are doing right now. With all that is going on in the world, here in New York, we had yesterday Gay Pride Day, which is terrific. And I think, very frankly, personally, everybody should be allowed to marry anybody they want who's an adult. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court case had nothing to do with that. It actually hurts the cause. And then we had, recently, you probably haven't carried this, but here locally in New York, we have the second of these escapees who was gunned down by the police. We're talking about that. And then we have the Confederate flag. Again, chewed up, predigested worms being fed to us by the media. And meanwhile, Alex, they look to Greece and they say, you know, this is a rather arcane and recondite subject. Bonds and IMF and bailouts, and that's Greece. That's some third world Greece, the backbone of democracy. But that's Greece. It's never going to happen to us. I don't have time for that. I'd rather talk about Caitlyn Jenner or Confederate flags. I'd rather take history, Alex, and revise it. I'd rather take a subject, namely Confederate flags, that we've never talked about. It's the perennial subject now, much like team mascots are, whether the Redskins is a racist term. And we just talk about it because it creates the delusion and the illusion and the perception that we're a part of something and we're involved. When in fact, it's predigested nothing, because the real issue, the real frightening things involve issues, Alex, that are, to many people, arcane and recognized.
That's right. It's cold-blooded, pre-planned diversion while earth-shattering huge events are taking place. Build up for war with Russia, global depression, bank runs. And then I hear this too. Why do I care about Greece? Well, because you're about to bail them out. Or right. Why do I care about derivatives? Because you've been signed on to them. Or why do I care about the stock market? Because the company you work for is able to pay you because of stock. There's this super selfishness too built into the average person. Not everybody, but a large portion, a large minority, where they think their selfishness is a shield, when in truth it's that selfishness that brings them down. And I want you to speak to that, but separately, I'm a libertarian. So what does it really do if a bunch of trial lawyers now are going to be able to get, you know, 2 women or 2 men's money when they get divorces with each other?
Right.
It's the fact of, what is our gross domestic product? Obsessing over the Redskins, obsessing over Confederate flags, right. Obsessing over transgender people, when that's not our GDP. That's not, we used to be known for science, for developing things, for invention, for being trailblazers. They're giving us a mentally dysfunctional, balkanized fight with each other Tower of Babel that only makes it worse. It's so cold-blooded, and you're a constitutional lawyer. I don't know your view yet, but I'll give you mine. It's not the Fed's place to be saying what the state should be doing concerning this, and it's like all these other, it's like the Fed's saying states can't legalize marijuana. It's the same deal.
Let me ask you this, Alex. Let's assume that a state were to tell, let's say the state of Texas, if you don't have a child within 1 year, let's say there's a law that's passed, you don't have a child within 1 year of your marriage, of your nuptials, your marriage is therefore void. Because after all, marriage is about children. And if you're not having children, either because you elect to have children, you can't have children, you're too old to have children.
I would say that's wrong. And for those that don't know, it's already happening.
Right. Well, guess what? You've just agreed to the federal government commenting on what is and isn't permissible under state law. You see, I believe in gay marriage, but I don't necessarily believe that this is the right vehicle. I believe a woman should have the right to an abortion. I'm sorry, but I don't think Roe against Wade is a way to do this. I think this fiction of privacy that Harry Blackmun carved out of nowhere is a problem. Then you have this intellectually disingenuous nonsense, Alex. You have Justice Roberts, who the day before basically upheld Obamacare using, I don't even want to call it a fiction, with all due respect to fiction, but he used this unique aspect, this new vector of judicial activism to basically give a 6-3 majority for Obamacare. And then the next day, he railed against judicial activism, who said, how dare we, the Supreme Court, act as...
Sure, well, undoubtedly they use the gay marriage thing as a political football, a political toy to throw back and forth. But specifically on Obamacare, then, I mean, I'm no constitutional lawyer, but it's not equally applied. It's run by foreign groups it makes you buy a product. I mean, it's just the ultimate screw job, and it sets the precedent on so many fronts. What is your view of Obamacare?
Well, Obamacare, under this, you see, let me go back. My view of Obamacare is one thing. The Constitution and the Supreme Court can be tailored to make anything fit. Anything. This idea that Scalia came up with, that you could look through this prism of either judicial activism or non-judicial activism, but originalism or strict construction, and you can apply this algorithm that gives you the correct constitutional interpretation, is nonsense. The Constitution is so silent as to the Air Force, even how many justices there are in the Supreme Court. It can be anything you want. But you see, this has been portrayed to the American people, the theme, as it's about freedom and love, and which is great, but you don't even need the Constitution to do that. Let me explain. In 1967, Alex, there was a case, Loving against Texas, which basically overruled statutes which made it a felony for there to be miscegenation, black and white people marrying. And they will often use that as an example to explicate, to bolster this decision. That was different because that penalized people criminally for blacks and whites marrying, but not whites and Asians or any other race. It was a different vehicle. They missed the point. This past week we have, and you were the one who, before anybody talked about this, I have to mention this horrible case of Charleston yet again. Alex, the thing to me that always is forgotten, and this is somewhat of a different subject, but not really. We will know everything about guns that were used, what he said, what he uttered, what he wore, what he Facebooked. We will never look at perhaps any type of psychotropic or psychiatric medication. This, to me, is absolutely amazing in that it shows you how effete and how impuissant and how really atesticular, for lack of a better word, the trial lawyer's bar is, because do you know what would happen if we could turn the issue of whether a known medication that is in the public commerce was responsible for taking otherwise normal people and making them homicidal? This would be a products liability a boondoggle, the likes of which you've never seen.
Exactly, but they want to blame the guns, so there's a mainstream media conspiracy of silence by omitting the truth. But getting back to the whole Supreme Court issue, I mean, I think what you're getting at here, and I agree with it, is the government shouldn't be involved in the institution of religion. First Amendment, it shouldn't be involved in the First Amendment because it has no jurisdiction. No. And it shouldn't be involved with who you live with or who you marry. Clearly, it's unconstitutional. It's not the jurisdiction, in my view, of the federal government to even be involved in it. Is that an accurate statement in your view?
Absolutely. In the state of New York, where I am right now, first cousins can marry. In the state of New York, a person can marry his adopted child. Now, those are the laws of New York. New York, for better or for worse, decided we're going to do this. Texas may allow the age of 16. Virginia may allow 14. You may have a variety of parameters that the people of a particular state find to be within the rubric of what marriage is.
And that's why we have states, and it gives you choice, and if you don't like it, move to another state. Now,
Precisely.
why even have states with this big imperial government floating around, and then it takes its orders from secret bodies like the TPP? I want to come back, Lionel, get your take on the TPP. I want to talk to AD and some of the other callers, Wild, Matthew, Jason, Dwight, and others that are holding. We'll be right back with Lionel from LionelMedia.com. Don't forget, we've already sold out of Liver Shield, OccuPower, Childees, and Prostagard. Some of these will be 8 weeks till we get them back. So it's not a gimmick when I say we're about to sell out of Survival Shield, Mason Iodine, that's done so much for me and others. You've heard what it does. The Good Halogen. So many people are deficient. InfoWarsLife.com, and purchase of that product funds our operation. And we've still got 6 other products that haven't sold out that are excellent as well at InfoWarsLife.com. And your funding helps fund this operation. PrisonPlanet.tv for the nightly news as well. Stay with us. Third hour coming up. We're going to talk economy and what's happening in Greece with Lionel, constitutional lawyer, Lionel Media analyst. We're going to talk to AD and others coming up in the next segment. Then we'll shift gears after we take calls and get back into this whole Confederate flag situation, which is the biggest waving a red flag in front of a bull I've ever seen. I mean, this is just classic. To now, the Memphis mayor wants to literally dig up Confederate general and move him. This is just getting where you're just obsessed and offended by everything, and people don't even know historically what the context is. This is the rise of the total idiots. Like Mark Dice talked to 10 people, and 7 of them signed a petition to ban the American flag and change it to an all-seeing eye pyramid. This is the triumph of mind control, where people are illiterate about everything. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, social skills, talking, but they know how to get obsessed and what to be offended by. And it's all phantoms while they're being conquered. Lionel, TPP, is this not one of the most naked examples of a secret body that we're not allowed to see? Part of it leaks, totally draconian, bipartisan, they pass it, and now Obama is going to be coming back with his fast-tracked initiative to a foreign body, and we don't even know everything that's going on in it. I mean, this is really incredible.
You know, Alex, that the word fast track, I think, is often misunderstood by people as meaning effective and efficient and quick. You know, when $29 million or so was fast tracked to individuals in Charleston, no, they say, great. No, fast track is a euphemism. It means, in essence, a non-review, something that is not subject to review or inspection. Now, what people don't understand, and you said this initially, was the word globalism sounds good. It sounds terrific. It sounds like, oh, that's wonderful. We are the world. Remember that? I like to teach the world to sing. Kumbaya. Let's hold hands. What we're talking about is a reconfiguration of the world. I don't have to tell you this. Into this unipolar world. This is beyond, let me be frank with you. And I'm sorry. I'm going to say this. The American people, by and large, are great people, but stupid, illiterate, not very bright, not very educated, great on sports, great on issues that don't matter, great on pop culture, great on a lot of stuff. But when it comes to being able to understand what it is that is critical to their survival, absolutely not a clue. I'm sorry to say this. I'm sorry to break the news to you, but we are absolutely mind-bogglingly demented when it comes to being able to recognize this. I don't understand why people don't get the fact that what we're seeing is a reconfiguration, a reconsolidation, a reestablishment of the world. You know, Alex, you've said New World Order to the point where I think people don't really understand it. I think they have habituated to it. I think they have been conditioned to this term as some kind of weird conspiratorial phrase or shibboleth that you use that is somehow doesn't mean anything. We're talking about taking everything that we know, our jurisdiction, our country, and turning it into basically a member state of a world organization where the president of the United States isn't the leader of the free world, but basically we're the enforcer. We're the Luca Brasi. We back up either NATO or central banks and the like. And this, right off the bat, what I've just said, and you understand it, listeners understand it, but for most American people, I'm sorry, they will scratch their head and say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but I do know my flags, and I do know Caitlyn Jenner, and I know sports. I'm sorry, Alex, but that's who we are. The United States of the illiterate.
That is the best 3 minutes I've heard, hands down, describing the TPP. It is a total takeover, puts all of our laws and rights into a shadowy, secret, offshore, corporate fascist combine so they can do to us what they've done to Greece. Well said, Lionel. Mother arrested, charged with child endangerment for letting a 7-year-old play in a park across the street from her house while she watched her. Playground was 200 feet away from her home within eyesight. We all under about the age 50 or so, or I'd say everybody above the age of 30, grew up being able to go outside and play. Or grew up, even in the city, people would send 7, 8, 9-year-olds out to go get them a carton of milk at the corner store. Kids had to be able to learn how to follow orders, how to not walk on the street, how to cross the street when the light turned green, how to look both ways. And so if you're above about the age 30, you grew up in a world where you had the basic freedom of movement. But this latest article is nothing compared to the one 2 weeks ago where the 11-year-old, his parents didn't get home till 6, he got home at 4:30, was playing basketball in the cyclone-fenced backyard, and they saw him playing alone, and a neighbor called, and the police came, and they charged the parents with endangerment. She took it to court and barely beat it. But since when did it become the law that you couldn't play outside? Well, there is no law. They can say that we interpret this as endangerment. Well, a jury's going to find if you give a bucket of hydrofluorosilicic acid or some other deadly acid to a 7-year-old and tell him to go out and play in the street with it, that it's beyond child endangerment. It's attempted murder because you could reasonably think they're going to get killed or blinded with this. But it is the established activity of humans for children to play outside. But see, it's the triumph of ignorance. There is the perception that gun crime's up, even though it's down between 50 and 60% since 1992, Justice Department's own numbers. That's not even debated. There is the perception there are more shark attacks, even though they're actually down. There is the perception that there's all this rampant racism. All of this is the triumph of hype. And I want to get into the economy and take your phone calls, but during the break I was reading this article again where the police and the prosecutors with a straight face go, yes, this was very dangerous. And I even looked up the area. It's a nice area. But so what if your 7-year-old's playing in the park across the street and you're watching them? Let them. That's a parent's decision. That's why Texas is a Baptist state, super conservative, but you can give your 5-year-old a drink of your beer. You can buy them a beer. It's up to the establishment owners, again, business owners' rights, to refuse to sell you that wine or beer for your small child. In Europe, they give their kids watered-down beer and wine. The point is that it's still the law in Texas. You can go in and order your child a beer. In a super conservative state, because they understood you take parental rights away, you lose everything. It's up to a parent's decision. Now, if you've got your child playing with what you know is a, say, dysfunctional firearm, and they don't have firearms training, and they're in their backyard with it, that is child endangerment. But is it child endangerment? They're now trying to pass laws to say giving anyone under the age of 10 a BB gun? The problem is the children are out of control. They've never been in the real world. They don't know how to tie their shoelaces figuratively. They play video games all day. The studies show they're becoming brain damaged from it. They don't even have language anymore. My dad's dad knew how to fix anything. And knew how to do accounting and play golf and square dance at the same time. The point is he was a man. He could do it all. My dad, though, was a specialist. He went to college, became a chemist and a doctor. He still knows probably, let's not exaggerate, 10 times more than I do about fixing things. Not as much as his dad. Then there's me. I don't know that much. But compared to most men that are 41, I know a lot. Most men I know now can't change a tire under the age of 40. And they're making the cars now where if you put a battery in, say in a Volkswagen, it sends you a message and turns the battery off because you didn't go to their dealership and pay extra for one. That's the smart cars where everything's wired. They're building a world where we're basket cases. And our guest beautifully said that earlier, Lionel. When he talked about we're obsessed with everything that doesn't matter, everything that can't feed us, everything that can't teach us how to be competent. Rebel flags and Caitlyn Jenner. But we don't know all the basics. This is the plan, and now we're watching the exact playbook the IMF and World Bank fronts for private banks. IMF and World Bank's just the Federal Reserve's name worldwide. Same European banks own it. They are now imploding Greece with the same program, convincing the world that most of it is Greek debt when 92% of it is not, just like Iceland. Iceland, though, arrested their head bankers, went into all the documents and said, in their case, 93% of this is not our debt. We'll pay the 7% that's national debt. The 93 that's derivatives, we're not doing it. England put them on a terror watch list. Every Icelander, 400,000 of them, they had to back off when it came out it was British banks involved. So they're going to try to do this. Imagine when they have a cashless society. That's my rant. We're going to get Lionel's rant. Then we're going to A.D., Wild, Dwight, and others. Go ahead, Lionel.
Alex, I've got to tell you this. In fact, I've wanted to say this for a long time. When I was a prosecutor, the area that I found the most problematic was doing dependencies in the juvenile system. And specifically, I used to deal with termination of parental rights, TPR. And what happened was the state of Florida at the time would come in and say that if you could show that a child was either abused, abandoned, or neglected, depending upon the standard, which nobody could really tell me, you'd go before a judge, and a judge would remove a child, disentangle, disengorge, like conjoined twins, a child with its parents. And what nature gave you, a court would separate that. And what was interesting was that they would take these poor people who might not have been, they were poor. They might not have been the smartest. They might not have been educated. They had a hard time with schedules, but they were the parents. And they would have a mother, let's say, go to parenting classes or learn about something. Somebody would pick up a phone, drop a dime on a neighbor. And my favorite was failure to thrive. You know, the Jones kid, he has a son who doesn't look like he's growing as much as the others. Something's wrong, something's strange. And then they would call an overworked, underpaid, 20-year-old caseworker who knew nothing about raising kids, who was so afraid of perhaps signing off and being the negligent caseworker who let little Alex go to his death, that they would leap on this family, overreact, and then you are doomed. And then they would take this poor parent and they say, you know what, Mrs. Jones, because you didn't go to your parenting classes, because you didn't follow this set of instructions, which we think you need to know as a parent, and now little Alex has been placed in foster care with this rich family, with a lot of cool toys and a lot of neat stuff for such a long period of time that we think it would be unfair to return Alex from this very nice family who might want to adopt him back to you in your trailer and your squalor and this hovel. And Alex, murder cases didn't bother me. I shouldn't say that they bothered me, but nothing caused me to lose sleep, to realize that I was a part of a system that could take a child. Think about this. Forget divorce. Divorce is horrible enough, but you are still the parent. And you might not be married, but it's two people who kind of sort of agree. But just imagine the power of the state of Texas or Florida saying that your child, by virtue of edict, by virtue of judicial fiat, is not yours anymore, cannot take under your will. You have no authority. Goodbye. And imagine this happens every single day. And nobody can tell you, Alex, if you called up a police officer and said, listen, I want to show my son how to use weapons. Can you tell me what to do? No. Can you give me guidelines? No. I want to spank my child. But I want to do it the right way. Can you tell me what isn't acceptable? No. I want to put my child on a vegan diet or a macrobiotic diet, or I'm against circumcision, or I'm against this medication, or I'm whatever. Can you tell me what is okay?
No, they won't. It's all nebulous, so they can do whatever they want. And it all began with saying parents needed the state to come in. And then once you've destroyed the role of parents, they can take everybody's kids, or you're just basically a babysitter. You follow what the government system says for your children, or they'll be taken. And the next shoe to drop is inoculate, or we're going to take your children. It's already begun outside of law by projecting neglect onto it, as Melissa Harris, Perry, and MSNBC have wanted.
We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
And that's central right there, because to decode this, when you get involved with because I've covered this as well, and I got to where I couldn't cover it back when I was a local reporter, because these were good families they were taking kids from. These are people who hadn't done anything, and I knew it was because it was a good kid that was 2 years old or a year old, and they could get $500,000 in the racket for rich parents that didn't know what was going on, to get it. Some trophy wife who can't have kids and some guy that's worth $50 million. That's who they were really targeting, was the good families in many cases, to get those premium, quote, children. And to see it, it was so incredibly sick. And then all the social workers and lawyers and cops were doing was trying to cover their butts to go along with the system. It is unbelievable.
And Alex, one of the things that you got to realize, or people have to realize, is that you have people who are untrained. I got to tell you this one story.
Stay there. I'm going to come back. We got to go to break. Can't skip another break. And then I'm going to let you finish that story. I'll be with us the rest of the hour. And then AD and Dwight, Wild, Matthew, Jason, we're going to go to all of you on the situation in Greece, so don't hang up. I want to get to all of you. But Lionel's always got fascinating takes on everything, especially with his prosecutor history. My mother never calls me during the show. I mean, maybe once every 2 years. She sent me a text message. She's listening, and she says, I've been listening for over an hour, no discussion of Puerto Rico saying they're going to default on their sovereign bonds. We did cover it the first hour, Mother. But yes, and she finished the text message with, this is a big deal. We are going to go to the calls. We are going to get into this. There's a problem there, Lionel. I've been so close to this so long that as it all starts to happen, I'm not making the big deal out of it I should be. I mean, I'm accused of being an alarmist. I'm kind of like an alarmist before it happens. Once it all happens, then I'm kind of just, well, here it is. But it's very disgusting. I want to get to that in a moment, but finishing up with what's changed is the feds and the guidelines and the college teaching says it's abuse and neglect if kids are playing in the park across the street. And you've got tattletale neighbors that start the chain reaction where the police are worried about liability if they don't respond and the kid gets hurt. What's changed is we're a nation of bizarre cowards that are afraid to even come out of our houses. We've been domesticated. How do we reverse that, Lionel?
Let me tell you, well, we need a revolution. Well, let me tell you something, Alex. If somebody picks up the phone and drops a dime on you and your wife, and you all of a sudden, the Jones family is on the hit parade, you can't get your name off it. It's not like when you're arrested, you can steal it. It's there. And it's an administrative record. You say, excuse me, this was unfounded, this particular case. I need licensure in the coming future. I'm having insurance problems. I want to be let's say a foster parent myself. Can you remove this report, even though it was unfounded? I'm sorry, you can't. And by the way, Alex, if I could, at Lionel Media, my Twitter feed, which I blurt out memes all day long, I talked about this one time, which really got people's attention. This is a true story. Little girl was at a school. She falls down. She goes to the nurse. The nurse looks at her just to make sure she's okay. They take off her shirt, and they see bruises. Oh, bruises. So immediately, the teacher, freaking out, saying, I don't want to be responsible for not reporting it. She calls CPS. CPS sends over a 20-something who's, again, overworked, underpaid. And Alex, so help me God, this 20-something turns to this kid and says, does your daddy ever touch you down there? It was a single parent. Where that came from, I have no idea. Does your daddy touch you there? He said, yes. That was it. When? She said, after my bath. He said, aha, ritualized. You know what it turned out to be? And thousands of dollars and embarrassment later, he had to apply an ointment for someone to the doctor for some type of vaginitis or something, and it said after a bath. Now, when you are put in the position, Alex, and imagine all the enemies that you have and people that you don't like, but when you are even hinted at as far as being a part of child abuse or child sexual misadventure, the stigma sticks forever. And you can't.
And it's all because of the ninnying. It's like the famous cases of Walmart and others where it showed the mom and the dad with their two girls. They each had a towel over them, and they were hugging them, and they had towels on them, and they were calling it pedophilia. When real pedophilia is going on, nobody's getting in trouble half the time. And then meanwhile, the photo came out on the news, like on ABC News, and it was nothing. But Walmart wanted to protect itself. Or Eckerd's, I mean, it's happened with all of them.
Right.
And so they call in the police who then act like it's real and legitimate. We've got to go to break, and then I promise, or they can punch me in the nose. I'm going to A.D., Matthew, Wild, Jason Dwight on the economy. And I should have done this the whole show. I know you would want to talk about that as well. As we go out to break, let's start talking about this now. How big a deal is it? Because we know the economy is untenable. We know the debts are untenable. But we've been signed on to the derivatives is the main reason we're untenable. They raised taxes so much in Greece that less money came in. Now they want more taxes raised. And people say, IMF, you're not stupid. Why are you doing this? Because they want them to become fully bankrupt and fully conquered. But what do you make of Puerto Rico? New York Times, Puerto Rico's governor says he'll need to pull the island out of a death spiral. It's included that the Commonwealth cannot pay its $72 billion in debts, and administration will probably have wide-ranging financial repercussions. I mean, this is the 51st state right there, bro.
Alex, let me put it to you this way. Let me ask you this question. If you wanted to be the most powerful person on the planet and you wanted to destroy a country, how would you do it?
I'd do it with an economic takeover, buying off the ministers.
Exactly. I would not fire a weapon. I would not send in a troop.
Stay there. Explain this when we come back. The Secret to Ruling the World with Lionel, LionelMedia.com. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com, and PrisonPlanet.com. And I'm glad my mom texted me because, every 2 years she might call. One time Charlie Sheen was on Melting Down, that famous deal. She called up and she said, stop this right now. This is not what your show is about. Shut it off now. And, of course, I didn't. Should have listened to her.
On the mark.
I wish that I'd been wrong about all this, but it wasn't hard to be right. History's pretty simple. They say it doesn't repeat, but that it rhymes. And that certainly is a very apropos way of putting it. Lionel, former defense lawyer and prosecutor, TV critic, radio host, one of the top 100 talkers in the country, according to Talkers Magazine. He joins us. I met him years ago, and I was in the keynote address at a Talkers in New York, where he was the master of ceremonies. And I don't even agree with, maybe 10% what he has to say, but I get his perspective on the 10% I don't agree with. But on the other 90, he has a great way of putting things, a lot of good stories and anecdotes. Without further ado, I want to go to A.D. and others that have been patiently holding, but I wanted to give you a chance because you got cut off by the break. Some people spin this over the years and say, you say the debt's too big and that it's untenable because you want confidence to be lost. And if people listen to you, we're going to go under. And I'm like, no. If we have, $2 quadrillion plus in derivatives that aren't our debt that these big six megabanks created and have signed us onto, and if they keep raising taxes when they know at a certain point it hurts tax receipts, and we know the philosophy is to consolidate control, you were getting to that point, so restart with how do you conquer a country. This is what they admit they're doing. Everybody from Henry Kissinger to Brzezinski Brzezinski to just all of them wrote books bragging how they're conquering the world. There's a reason when Brzezinski Brzezinski or Henry Kissinger or David Rockefeller shows up and the Saudi princes are bowing to them, not the other way around, then Obama bows to them. I mean, these guys really did set up our modern world, and it's not pretty. And now they're getting ready to take down, because they've already taken over the world. They don't need the West anymore to take over the world under other guises, democratizing, humanitarian, whatever. Now they're in their end game. Radicalism will take over the Middle East and Africa, financial implosion in Europe. They've already taken over Latin America. I mean, I know the history of Latin America, a gestalt of it. And how, even though it had a history of sugarcane slaves and others that came there and natives that didn't know how to fight back against it and colonialism, after they got out from under colonialism for a while, in 5 or 6 spots, they were booming. They were free market. They were as rich as we were. They were inventing stuff. It'd be so cool if I could move to Chile or Argentina when I was old. It's beautiful down there. It'd be so cool to have other free countries. I look around, there's nowhere for me to run. I mean, I'll be honest, if there was some really cool free place, I'd get out of here. I mean, I love America, but, man, I'm telling you, the people are so dumbed down on average. The awake people are the salt of the earth. We've been an exceptional country. No one, I mean, I was at my cousin's wedding reception at the Kalamazoo Air Museum. The pictures do not do it justice. And the reception at night with a great DJ and dancing was underneath the SR-71 Blackbird. They had prototypes in the 50s. It officially started flying in 63, like the B-2 bomber officially started flying in 87. It was flying around the 70s. Really flies like Mach 5, Mach 6. The Russians had jets that would go Mach 3 and missiles that would go Mach 4.5, and they couldn't shoot it down. It's because it goes faster than Mach 3, boys. And they tell us this is still the fastest plane in the world. And my table was right under its nose. And I looked at how science fiction-esque it looked with the cockpits forward and back. It's just amazing, our technology. I mean, countries can't build this today, okay? And different groups have different flares. You know, we can't build rockets like the Russians. They can't build stealth aircraft. But, I mean, I look at America, what we've become, it's a joke. And we have to admit we're a joke. It's like if I woke up in a ditch with vomit all over me, I've hit rock bottom. I haven't actually done that, but you get my point. If I wake up, don't know where I've been for 3 days like the hangover, might be a good time to stop. And we're a joke, people. Watching people savor, oh, let's dig up Confederate generals. Yes, yes. I mean, it's mental illness. All right, I'm ranting. Get in your point on the economy, then I'm going to the calls.
Well, Alex, you know, it's funny that you say this. I look out my window, and I can look, and I see the Intrepid right there on the Hudson River, and there's an SR-371 or 71 right there. And I see this thing every single day. And I'm thinking to myself, this was a time where we had enemies that were tenable and palpable and real. They weren't theoretical. They were actual enemies. It was the last time that the government, that our country really stood for something where we were fighting actual real enemies. And you can argue about how we got into Pearl Harbor. But, you know, Alex, you mentioned something before which is interesting about history, and that it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Tolstoy said the greatest piece ever on the subject, and that is that history would be a wonderful thing if only it were true. Yeah. And what we believe to be history does not exist. Now, if I were going to destroy this country, here's what I would do. First and foremost, I would distract with bread and circuses the people more than ever. Number two, I would have as a foundation for much of the economy this tissue-thin veneer, this lattice work of cotton candy, of air called the derivative. You say 1.5, maybe 2, could be 4 or 5 quadrillion dollars of nothing. Then I would throw in the myth, Alex, of American exceptionalism. I would always have the flag and Lee Greenwood and John Wayne and Ronald Reagan and Fox News and We're the Great. We are impenetrable. We are never going to be Puerto Rico or Greece or Iceland or Portugal or the EU. We're the United States. We are immunized. We have a vaccine against this. That's what will doom us. The idea, because Alex, this is a beta test. Everything happens in Europe and those parts of the world first, and then we catch. They sneeze, we catch.
Oh, you're right. The IMF and World Bank admits that, okay, we've taken out Africa and Latin America. Now we're going to move on to Western countries, and they're doing it. And the only country to say no was Iceland, and they went in, they arrested the people, and found out, guess what? It wasn't even their debt.
And I'm going to also go in, Alex, and I'm going to fool people. For example, I'm going to tell people that there are new currencies of war, a new casus belli. I'm not going to let them know about water. I'm not going to ever let them know that we went into Libya over water. That's right. And the Nubian sandstone aquifer. I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to ever let people understand that what and who runs the world are a very small group of central banks and very, very, at the top of the pyramid, these elite banksters and elite
all there is mega banks, big energy, and weapons.
And all we're going to do is we're going to create fictions and bad guys, through ISIS. And then we're going to confuse people. We're going to cause the American people to be always upset over something and fool them and dupe them into thinking that they're involved. We're going to let them think that there's some Confederate war flag or battle flag controversy. We're going to also throw it. We're going to have a country that knows more about the physics of footballs and Deflategate than they do the rudiments and abecedarian aspects of our economy. We're going to have people who are so brain dead and narcotized voluntarily and through this, Alex, through this individual hypnotic sense of selfishness. We're going to turn everything into a selfie. We're then going to turn and remove them from individual interaction and caring and being global and being connected. Because, Alex, one day people are going to say, when you ask them, where are you? Where do you live? You're not going to say, I'm a proud Texan. They're going to say, I live here. This is where I live.
My smartphone.
My smartphone. And because of this systemic, continued habituation, this organic dulling down, I'm going to then, as everybody is being distracted by the three-card Monte of the economic downturn, while we're looking this way, I'm going to little by little take everything from this country. And then one day, before you know it, it's going to be, it'll start maybe with a rumbling. It'll start, and we'll start to see the initial threads, the initial tremors of a financial collapse. And the very people who run the world are so thrilled because they crave and they thrive on disorder and disaster. That's why when there's racial disharmony, when there's crime, when there's people in the streets, when we turn to the government in the Hegelian dialectic, this classic, wonderful progression, and we say more control, more power, more authority, then one day it's over. And your tombstone, your words, your final valedictory, Alex, sad to say, will be, I told you so. You thought I was just somebody who was a conspiracy theorist. It's going to be too late. You thought I was doing this just for some kind of an act. You didn't realize that what I was saying and what the world was saying was there the whole time. And you didn't listen to me. And I told you. And I tried to make it as simple as possible. And I brought in guests to try to explain it in different ways. A Max Kaiser, a Salenti, a Paul Craig Roberts, Paul Watson. You've tried so hard. And you know, Alex, the thing that is the most important is that I don't know which vector I'm being hit with every single day. You wake up and you feel okay, and then you start to look at the news and you say, my God, where do I start today?
And that's what they want. They want to overwhelm us. But at the same time, we've just got to realize it is the animating contest. And studies show that old plants won't grow. There's not some wind, some rain, something pushing them. The reason we're so weak is we've been hiding from responsibilities. Well, that's why, you know, if you live a sedentary lifestyle, you die when you're 40, not when you're 90. We need to go out and fight this corruption and become aware of it, and that will turn the tide. But hey, this is the best interview ever with you, Lionel. I want to go to calls, but the way you crystallized, you know, the TPP in 3 minutes, the way in the last 6, 7, 8 minutes you crystallized, if I was the enemy of free humanity, or if I wanted to destroy a free country, this is how I would do it, or the plan to destroy a free people, you have done it. You've really laid it out. You can see how they've put us in a virtual reality of mainstream media and selfies and iPhones while they're stealing the real world around us. And it's not to conquer it so they can manage it better. They've decided to get rid of humanity. All right, AD, you're a real trooper. And then Dwight and all the rest of these troopers, thank you for holding. I really want to hear what you have to say on the economy, on Puerto Rico getting ready to go bankrupt, on Greece getting ready to go bankrupt, maneuvered into it by design. The media all calling them lazy. They deserve it. No. Yeah, you know, Obama saying just because you raise the debt limit doesn't mean you've raised the debt. This is, again, upside down, opposite world. You didn't build your business, but the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus are real. AD in Delaware, you're on the air. Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, Alex, after 10 years of you teaching me everything I needed to know on analyzing these idiots, you know, I've formed an amalgam of algorithm analytics, which really does point out their agenda atrocity and the bait and switch brain flooding that they like to run on the American people in Operation Mockingbird, which is really what your television is called. We're seeing the guys from Operation Paperclip popping up like whack-a-mole. That scares me with Kissinger and Brzezinski running around, hanging out with Bush, wearing tuxedos, and they're on their fifth or sixth heart transplant. It all spells the annihilation of the United States. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or the toilet paper policy, which means we will have none, basically is the spike in the last barrel of sustenance that this country has held out on while they lit the fuse. We are the dynamite, and the fuse is burnt through Europe. It's burned through the Ukraine and thereafter. I really believe, Alex, we're leading up to a bait and switch. In other words, he is the Manchurian candidate. Obama is a fake and a hologram. He's destroyed everything. I'm hearing talk of Russia being set up to attack America as they run to their bunkers, and they will use a bioweapon this time. And I kind of believe it, Alex.
All right. I'm going to have you comment again because you've been holding so long, but going back to Lionel. Lionel, all I know is I've always had a sense of urgency because I knew we needed to start reversing militarization of police, all of it, because it was part of a larger plan. Now the establishment, it's in the Guardian, it's all over the news, are building bunkers, are building secret airstrips. They are bugging out of major cities. Maybe it's not this year, next year. I hope it never happens. Let's be clear. I'm not Nero all Roneberms, but there does seem to be an urgency in the establishment itself, more and more indicators. We know we're sitting on a house of cards. What does your gut tell you, and what do other folks in New York tell you?
You know, it's funny you say that. You remember, Alex, when there was a tsunami and people suggested that there was not one elephant that was found dead? The theory is that if you notice elephants starting to move inland and animals, and you see those people who are responding on frequencies that we don't, pay attention to that. When the elite, when the uber rich, and by the way, I love these people that I know who think they're rich. They may have $1 million or $2 million. They're not even we're not talking about necessarily monetary rich. But when these people are sounding the alarm, when they're quietly disintegrating or disengaging themselves from that which is American, and they're moving like, who is it, the fellow who's from, the famous Cameron, who's going to New Zealand and others. What does that tell you? What does that mean when you're finding dual citizenships and the like? Look, the bottom line is that we have never seen anything like this in the history of the world, where we are going more and more towards a unipolar world. Putin talked about this. Look at how we are going to Putin and others and sticking a thumb in his eye and basically saying, come on, bring it on. There are people, Alex, who want there to be a world on fire. When there is calamity, when there is mayhem, when there is entropy, when there is disaster, then they can buy things on a fire sale. This is when they're the happiest. Remember, if Greece fails, who was it, Forbes who said this? How would you like to buy the Parthenon on a song? When a country collapses and they turn to say, help us out, who are the people helping you out? Alex, if you and I were the kings of the world, we would be high-fiving each other. We would go and we would say to these countries, we'll help you out, but it will be for a cost. And then little by little, our different unions, our different groups, we consolidate. And all of a sudden, what's missing? Jurisdiction, monetary systems, nationality. And all of the hints were there. From SPP to TPP to SOPA to CISPA, from every vector and angle you could imagine, from intellectual property to actual trade agreements. And we must master, and the elites have mastered, the art of the euphemism. It's a trade agreement. It's a world.
It's a fast track. It's a smartphone.
Yes. Speed. fast track, efficient, smart, be on the grid.
Patriot Act, Affordable Care.
No child left behind. I mean, you can't, the better the word, there's an inverse proportionality between the harmlessness of the word or the legislation.
That's right. Stay there. AD, one final comment, then Dwight. Well, Turkey's announced they plan to invade Syria, but not to aid Assad fighting al-Qaeda and ISIS. No, to take out the Kurds fighting ISIS. ISIS is a Western army. That shows you just how arrogant the elites are. We know they've been funding our enemies for a long time. It's not like they created some group that got out of hand. No, I mean, it was created to do this. And they're saying, brace for imminent attacks, but don't worry, we'll take all your rights away to keep you safe. I'm going to do some overdrive here so we can finish up with AD and who's been holding longer. Matthew, Dwight, Wild. I'm going to try to get to everybody. Jason, Lionel's our guest. Just briefly, because this is how I fund my operation. We have a lot of really great products at InfoWarsStore.com. Books, videos, Patriot T-shirts to help spread the word. 25% off right now on all the Molon Labe Come and Take It belt buckles. We've sold out of Liver Shield, OccuPower, Child Ease, Prostagard. Some of this will come in 4 weeks, some of it in 8 weeks. Okay, so when I tell you we're running out of something, it's not hype. We're going to run out of Survival Shield X2, our best-selling product, proprietary Deep Earth, good halogen, detoxer, energy. You've heard the reviews. It has a 99% third-party review rate. We have links to those reviews at InfoWarsLife.com. If you want to secure your Survival Shield X2, Nascent Iodine, now's the time. Super Male, Super Female Vitality are also excellent products. These are life-changing in my experience and many others. And your purchase supports the broadcast. You're really missing out if you haven't ever tried Super Male or Super Female Vitality. Learn more. See the instructional videos at InfoWarsLife.com. For the 4 products that are sold out, you can sign up on email there to be the first to get it when it comes in. All right, InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139. Okay, AD, I want to get to everybody else, but you brought up some really good points. 30-second response to what our guest said.
Alex, I think basically, to sum it up, the Umbra, which is the handlers of the BIS, are basically going to trigger a global reset, or in other words, a collapse by October. And in order for them to do this, they're going to create some type of mass bio issue or another, vaccine agenda, whatever it's going to be to get us to jump back into the boiling water. We are frogs in the water. The doomsday clock is at 5 seconds till. I feel this coming. Karen Hudis, she's always on target. Peter Schiff, Jaros, all of them. All your guests are fantastic. I want you to have an InfoWars Summit, 30 days long, brother.
No, I hear you. We need to do it. We need to have all these guests on. Jim Rogers, who's really smart, says it's going to be spectacular. And you can see the buildup. I mean, maybe it's not going to happen, but I've never seen such pre-buildup. Real fast, a comment to that, then we're going to go to Dwight, Wild, Jason, and others. Lionel.
We need to have your version of Bilderberg. And I always ask people this question, we laugh about that, but imagine if, and you've said this before, imagine if the NFL owners met every year secretly since 1954, or Hollywood. That is a beta test to see how will people look the other way. And I think what would be great is if we could do a summit, an actual summit. Imagine all of this, all of your guests, all of your followers. And
Patriotberg.
Yes, right, indeed. But just to me, Alex, this is the question I want people to think about is, do you think, and this is the bottom line, do you think that the United States is not susceptible to or is impervious to that which happens elsewhere? Could your pension, your bank account, stocks, your portfolio, your wealth, could it one day disappear? Because secretly, Americans believe that no, it can't, because somehow either we're blessed, we're the city on the hill, that we are immune, we are inoculated. Sure. That this happens elsewhere. But, Alex, it's the same playing field.
Well, it's like Japan building on a nuclear plants on a fault line, a tsunami zone, and then lying and saying it's impossible for this to happen, and General Electric went along with it. It's insanity. I'm going to come right back in 70 seconds and go right to Dwight, then right to Matthew, Jason, Wild, and others. So just be ready. I'm going to go to each person in order. In fact, it's Dwight, Wild, then Matthew. So stay with us. We'll be back in 70 seconds with your comment and question. I may just do more overdrive with Lionel. This is some pretty good radio, but pretty important stuff to debate. Maybe I'll let Lionel host the show till 20 after and take calls. because I've got to go to a meeting. We're going to do a 20 minutes overdrive to get to everybody. In fact, Lionel's going to host the show in the next segment and go to your calls. He's a talk show host in his own right. We're going to take a few calls right now. Dwight in Colorado, you're on the air. Then Wild is next. Go ahead.
Hey, how you doing, Alex? This is Dwight calling from Denver, Colorado. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good to talk to you, my friend. Thanks for holding.
Yeah, I just wanted to start off by saying I love what you guys do. You guys are all true patriots, and it's such a blessing listening to you guys. It's awesome.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to comment on the current financial crisis that's currently taking place in Greece. And my question for you and Lionel is, do you think that this is going to be the filibuster to initiate the one world currency and RFID chipping in every single person?
I don't think yet, but clearly they're now just turning everything into Alice in Wonderland by design. What's your take on that, Lionel?
Oh, it's happening incrementally, and it's happening by habituation, and as it will be said, successive approximation, which is basically the operant conditioning way of doing it. Little by little, you become used to it. Because as far as the RFID chip goes, it is becoming more and more a part of who we are. And congratulations to you for turning people on to this, the notion of transhumanism. Because what happens is we are going to one day be adorned with all of the jewelry and the accoutrement of our self-imposed prison.
And they're going to sell it as if it's cool. In fact, shifting gears, what about a New York judge saying make all the prisoners have chips? That's convicted. Next, it'll be arrested, just like DNA testing, inside their body to track them where they can't even remove the chip. So I guess in the spinal cord or in the brain. And then the governor getting up there like they just won World War II because they caught these two killers when they just let 36,000 violent illegals out. But they make this huge spectacle out of these two guys. It's an example of how the media and the government can decide what to make a big deal.
And it also, Alex, started by, remember, at first having your pet chipped. And then later on, they're going to say, well, you know, mom and dad who might suffer from dementia will chip them. And then let's get rid of an Amber Alert by chipping your child, voluntarily, of course. And then if it's good enough for your dog and mom and dad and your kid, what about you? And then one day, and it's been said a million times, one day when you are found guilty or you are to be removed, nobody needs to physically kill you. They just turn your chip off and you don't exist.
That's right. Unable to buy and sell. And they even say in these UN documents and cartoons they've done for British kids to get them ready, there'll be no cars. Those that are will be, you know, self-driving for the elite, very few. You'll get meat once a year, but the computer decides when you get health care. You know, the old bioethicists just killed people saying we're not going to treat them. Now the computer just decides.
No, but I want to
and it's the Watson computer, the Nazis. I mean, you can't make it up.
But I want to see somebody one day with their smartphone say, wait a minute, Alex, I see you, but it's not picking you up. I don't see that beep. You're not on the 24/7 worldview panopticon. You don't exist. You know, do you believe me or your lying eyes? You will have no significance, independent in terms of your flesh. And don't think for a moment, as we get more and more involved in 3D apparatuses and virtual, everything from virtual sex to virtual friendship.
Oh, they're going to claim we're discriminating by criticizing virtual reality. I predict that'll be the new thing, that if you criticize the Second Life type folks that live in La La Land, that you're being hateful to that group. But finish your point when we come back. You're going to have the floor. Dwight, thank you so much. We're going to go to Wild in Wisconsin first, and then we're going to go to Matthew, Jason, and Rich. I've got to go. We've got a lot of stuff coming from the Nightly News tonight, 7 o'clock Central. Lionel will host. I want to thank him for coming up. He'll take 4 or 5 phone calls to finish his point. But, yes, this is a planned takeover. And it's not Borg from Star Trek, but it might as well be. But instead of just invading us with laser beams and taking over, they're doing it by seducing us with Trojan horse.
Well, it's not Alex Jones, but it's Lionel Alive. And sitting in for Alex Jones, and I am beyond honored to share this particular encomium and this paean. We'll take your calls until 20 past the hour on a variety of subjects. And without further ado and without any delay, let's go right now to Wild in Wisconsin. Wild, you're on InfoWars on the Alex Jones Show, sir.
How you doing, Lionel? There's a Serbian saying that goes... Hi, can you hear me?
Wild in Wisconsin. Going
Can
once.
you hear me now?
Going twice. How about Matthew instead? Matthew, you're on the Alex Jones Show.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello? How are you doing today, man?
Fine, sir. Matthew,
Great.
what is on your
Hey,
mind, Mike?
What I would like to focus on are root causes of how we got to this point. And I think if we better understand, how we got here, we'd be able to better approach the future and how to change that. Now, there's a lady, and her name is Ashley Sanders. Are you familiar with her? With Move to Amend?
No, sir.
No? Well, she's out of Salt Lake City. And the thing is that she goes off on how corporations got personhood here in America.
Hey,
which
Matthew,
was
may I ask you a question? Matthew, I don't want to interrupt, and I'm sure she is fantastic, but since I've got you on the phone, may I ask you what your particular ideology is and your particular thoughts, irrespective of somebody else's? What do you think, sir, regarding the problems that we face?
Well, what I believe is that corporations are not people and money is not speech. And there's, that's a big issue in this, today's economy and the way that our policies are being driven up and backdoor deals. And now today it turned into $1, one vote rather than what it's supposed to be, rather than what the public needs it to be. And before it used to be a felony for corporations to contribute 1 penny to political campaigning and all that. Now that just becomes, regular practice.
Matthew, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you a question if I could, sir. Let's assume that Alex Jones Incorporated were to be a viable, as he is, political movement, and Alex Jones Incorporated wanted to contribute. Don't you think the real answer to get around the Citizens United problem is just disclosure? Let a corporation donate. Let a corporation involve itself in the system. But let's find out who the corporation is and how much they're actually contributing. Do you think that's a way around it?
Right, maybe open books, but that's the thing. It's like, well, we could go ahead and ask for disclosure, but we're only going to be told so much, what? And the thing is that if there was complete transparency, at one point within the first 75 years of this country, you had to actually go to be able to get incorporated. You had to go down to your local senators and actually convince them how your business was going to benefit the public.
Well, Matthew, my friend, you make some excellent points. I certainly thank you for your call. Let's go right now to Jason, who's calling. Jason, you're on the Alex Jones Show. Jason. All right. How about Rich? Rich, are you there, sir? You're on the Alex Jones Show.
Yeah, how you doing, Lyle? I'm really PO'd, man. And what I want to know is this. This is treason, plain and simple, across the board. TPP, all the things that have been going on, these documents, if they were revealed, they're treasonous. And the people who are letting it happen are abetting treason. I don't understand why. Why a department? Isn't there any department? For example, the sheriff's department has more power in the state than the president does, okay? And they can deputize where they need to deputize when they can't handle a situation that's beyond their singular means. Why can't this happen? Why can't we arrest these people like we did in the good old days? Arrest these people, try them, and find them guilty of treason. That's what this is. And it just keeps going on, and I don't understand why.
I appreciate that. But the problem that exists is that if you were to try to do that, you were to say, okay, let us argue. Let us go and declare this to be unconstitutional. Let's try to get the Supreme Court to grant us certiorari. Let us bring a case against the government saying that this is a violation of the treaty's provision or some particular aspect of the Constitution. The Supreme Court then grants certiorari or the right of review. But something tells me that the Supreme Court, based upon the current framework, is going to merely say this is within the province of the legislature. This is within the province of the president. This is within the realm of possibilities of legislation. And even though you may not agree with it, what your remedy is to kick somebody out of office. This is a political question. The word treason is something which is a fascinating subject. The idea to me that something is so reprehensible, so contrary to the rudiments of this country and to the bases of this Constitution, I would venture to say that that word means virtually nothing today. The thing that I don't understand, and this is the part that I have talked to Alex about and others as well, is that there was a time when we as the United States were the only game in town, and we thought about what really affected us. What was it that affected us and our way of thinking and our livelihood? Did it present a clear and present danger to us? Not something theoretical. Because ask yourself, what was the last engagement, the last war, the last military action that we ever got involved in that dealt with a real and true threat to this country? Something that was direct and absolute. I'm still waiting. You know, I was here on that terrible day in 2001, on September the 11th. And I was here, and I remember how I felt. And I remember at the time how being a part of this, and the smell, and the sound, and the attitude that lingered in New York. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't care who was responsible for this, I wanted to get them. And I'll never forget this, because now I look back and I say it almost, I'm almost ashamed of what I thought, because I was so angry. And it didn't really matter who was involved, whether Afghanistan was involved or Iraq. It didn't matter to me. And then after the fact, after the smoke cleared, literally and actually, after I started to read, and after I awakened and woke up and saw what was going on, I realized that I had this particular piece of terror used as a fulcrum, as a wedge. It was used against me to lure me into going along and just signing off on this. And then little by little, I found out that these people, these countries that were allegedly responsible for this horror that I saw and felt and experienced, that Afghanistan, lo and behold, happened to be the Saudi Arabia of lithium. Isn't that amazing? And that all of these countries that miraculously were involved somehow tangentially or theoretically with 9/11, all of them had tremendous assets that other people wanted. And the great Gerald Celente said it best. And at that time he said, and still does, what do you think the chances of us ever involving or invading Iraq if their major export was broccoli? And little by little I realized, oh my God. And from that moment on, I'll never forget this, something happened to me. And it's happened to you as well. And Alex, in many respects, was responsible for turning my ignition switch on, of making me aware of what's going on. You know, you talk about what's treasonous. I see right now something that is very easy for people to understand. Very easy. And it's this wonderful thing called the Bill of Rights. This wonderful aspect of the Constitution. And people will argue whether they have a bead on what it is or not, whether they really truly understand it. And I am seeing the First Amendment and the Second Amendment for sure. The Third Amendment, we haven't had much of a problem with that, quartering soldiers at your home against your will. But Fourth Amendment search and seizure and Fifth Amendment and due process, all of them are systematically being eroded, little by little, bit by bit. And if all is said and done, when we look back on this wonderful civilization of ours, this is going to be the thing that changed everything. I always ask this, and I want you to think about this, and I appreciate Alex allowing me the chance to do this. But I want you to imagine if you could meet Hamilton or Jefferson or Madison today, or George Orwell, Mr. Blair, and you could have a conversation with them. What would you tell them? What would freak them out? What would rock their world? And if ever I met Eric Blair, George Orwell, I would say, remember how you wrote 1984 and you envisioned the enemy being the state, kind of Stasi-like? Well, you imagine the state and the secret police breaking in and leaving a microphone next to the wall socket or next to the coffee maker. Remember when you imagine the government actively surveilling us, by breaking in and breaking the curtilage, as we lawyers refer to the area around your home. Well, this changed everything. Because what we did when we signed on to this, we accepted its irresponsibility, so to speak. And whenever we had a new app, or we wanted to be known, and we wanted to use GPS, and we wanted to have these things, these wonderful little tools and gadgets and gizmos, we signed on. And we took the Fourth Amendment and we gave it away. That's what I would say. Well, on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you. To Alex Jones, thank you. And to his tremendous staff, thank you as well. I am so honored to be a part of this. Follow me on Twitter at Lionel Media, and I hope to be with you again as soon as possible. Thank you so much.